Welcome to the complete timeline of the Poppy Playtime series. This will be including events that were alluded to prior to the chapters themselves, and also content shown on the Mob Entertainment YouTube channel. I will be showing the events shown chronologically, while also giving a play-by-play of the events that occur within the first 4 chapters released thus far. Please keep in mind that the full story of Poppy Playtime is not yet released, so new things will likely be added as future chapters come out. Let's get into it. An aspiring young inventor by the name of Elliot Ludwig founded a toy-making company, focusing on creating great products for children to enjoy, and keeping parents all around the United States happy. Playtime Corporation, or better known as Playtime Co., soon became the biggest and most successful toy manufacturing company in the world. 1930 also marks the creation of a construction company, Warren Buck Construction by Darwin Silver. They would go on to help build much of the facility for Playtime Co. in the coming years. Playtime Corporation took the world by storm due to its innovative toys. It was in the 50s that they created a special doll named Poppy Playtime. Poppy had the special ability to be able to hold a full conversation with a child. A remarkable feat. You aren't just purchasing a toy for your child, you're giving them a friend that they can actually speak to, and it speaks back. It helps with social skills and relationship building, something you couldn't get from any other child's toy. It's really no surprise that Playtime Co. found the success that they eventually did. Playtime Co. has many different employees, all of which joined the company at different times. But we know that one employee named Thomas Clark joined Playtime Co. in 1955, working as a pediatrician for the children that resided within a place Playtime Co. named Playcare. In the late 1950s, a brand new toy was introduced to the public by Playtime Co. Doughy Dough. It would be the second major commercial hit for the company and would be revamped every decade there on out. Plus, you get the added bonus of morphing Doughy into whatever your imagination could think of. The 60s proved to be a critical turning point for the Playtime Corporation. After the huge success of Poppy Playtime for the past decade, it was time for Playtime to expand even further. Elliot dedicated himself once again to creating special toys. He would go on to hire 2 more notable employees, Jimmy Roth and Leith Pierre. Jimmy Roth would become the chief marketing officer for the company, responsible for promoting the company's new toys to families around the country, while Pierre would become the head of innovation, a position very high in Playtime chain of command. In the year 1960, Playtime created the Make a Friend machine, used to create every single Playtime Co. toy for the market. It had the ability of autonomously creating toys without outside intervention. The creation of the Make a Friend machine was just a glimpse of Elliot Ludwig's incredible ingenuity, and would prove invaluable for Playtime. With the pursuit to create the next Poppy Playtime, the toy of Bron was created. A small red dinosaur that wouldn't have the commercial success that Poppy did, but it would prove its usefulness decades later. Get a look at this guy. This is Boxy Boo, a toy created 5 years after the creation of Bron. Unfortunately, Boxy Boo was also a bit of a commercial failure, not selling nearly as much as Poppy or Bron. Thanks to a wildlife conservation campaign, Playtime Co. released yet another toy to their line in the 1970s, this time being Yarnaby. He would go on to have multiple releases as the years went on. In 1972, Playtime Co. signed an 18-year contract with Cyril Warren Buck of Warren Buck Construction Company to build and create anything that Playtime needed in relation to their Playtime facility. This would be overseen by Elliot Ludwig. In 1976, Playtime created their most ambitious creation yet, Playcare, an orphanage created below the Playtime facility that was founded by Elliot Ludwig to house orphans. Whilst it was meant to care, teach and help the orphans, it was secretly used as housing for future test subjects, used by Playtime for their experiments. To hide this fact, Playtime would actually interview certain orphans to potential adopters, seemingly allowing some of these children to actually go through the proper adoption process. However, the children that either couldn't get adopted or showed promising results from the game station would be chosen to participate in the Bigger Bodies initiative. This is something that we'll touch on more extensively shortly. While not dated, we do know that during this rough period of time, Elliot Ludwig founded the Young Geniuses program for Playtime Co. The purpose of the program was to gather as much intelligent children as Playtime could, and to have them solve impossible questions. Once a child was accepted, they would be sent a letter from Elliot Ludwig congratulating them on their acceptance into the program, where they would be joined by their colleagues at Playtime to create something incredible for the future. One of the children that participated within the Young Geniuses program was a boy named Harley Sawyer. We could see a note written about Harley, presumably by Elliot. It talks about Sawyer's lack of friendships and how serious he is about everything regarding his work. He sees a drive that he's never seen before, and he is incredibly intelligent to boot. Sawyer is the embodiment of what Elliot was looking for when he created the program. Another interesting point noted is that Sawyer almost never smiles. However, the few times that Elliot has noticed him smile is when he is working on an invention or an experiment with Elliot. Elliot has tried to get to know the young man better, but he doesn't give away much, saying that he clearly doesn't think much of his home life, by the way in which he speaks about it, saying that he feels sorry for Sawyer. But Sawyer told Elliot that just being here with him and doing the things that they're doing is all that he ever wanted. Elliot expresses his admiration for the boy, saying that he wants to keep him around, considering him something special, and if he's correct, he could be the one to lead science into the future. It's hard to know exactly how long passes between the notes, but we do know that at some point, Elliot Ludwig actually removes Harley Sawyer from the Young Geniuses program. Despite how much it pains Elliot and how much he doesn't want to discourage or hurt Sawyer, saying that his mind is brilliant, probably the most brilliant that he's ever seen, reinstating that working with Sawyer has been one of the most rewarding experiences of his lifetime. But despite this, he cannot continue to lie to himself or hide a very glaring flaw in Sawyer, his lack of humility. He states how science should serve humanity, and that progress for the sake of progress does more harm than it does good. And throughout Sawyer's time in the program, Elliot has tried to temper his humility, much like he had to do to himself in his youth, but it only incites anger in Sawyer, saying that Sawyer actually lashed out at Elliot one evening and stormed out of the lab, telling Elliot not to be so soft, and how progress doesn't care about how anybody feels about it. This way of thinking scared Elliot, and he was lost in finding a way to actually convince Sawyer of an alternative. He began reflecting on his own youth, where even himself had a similar outlook as Sawyer does, saying that the one thing that truly changed him and gave him a new perspective on things was seeing the world and people bouncing back from rejection and hardship through connection, saying that rejection can sometimes be the very best thing for us. It reminds us why actions matter and who they're for. It made him a better person, and as such, he hopes that by removing Sawyer from the Youth Geniuses program, it will make him better too. He finishes the letter by challenging Sawyer to head for home and to look at the people around him, try and look for a new perspective, and to better know why progress actually matters, hoping that one day he will understand and even perhaps thank Elliot. The response to the letter from Elliot didn't go well with Sawyer, as we can see writing on torn pieces of paper. It mentions how he took everything, and how Sawyer thought Ludwig actually cared, but nobody cares, nobody understands, stating that Elliot Ludwig is a soft, pathetic, small-minded backstabber and nothing else. It even appears by the smudges on the paper that Sawyer was possibly crying when writing these notes, clearly affected by what he felt was a betrayal by Elliot. But it's in 1979 that Candy Cat was born, a toy made with the hopes of reaching a new generation in the new decade of the 80s. It was in '83 that we had our first big confirmed failure of a toy idea, notably Kick Me Pull. I mean, look at this abomination. Somebody literally just drew a face on an orange, gave it arms and a hat. Playtime recognized the stupidity of the design and rejected the toy, mentioning how the toy was laughed out of the presentation and that nobody liked him. Despite its rough reception the first time around, it was actually resubmitted for consideration. Jimmy Roth, the chief marketing officer, believed that the sellability of the toy would be more impacted on its name rather than its appearance. Despite attempts at actually renaming the toy, it was once again denied, and Kick Me Pull would take its rightful place in the room later known as the rejection room. 34 years after the creation of Poppy Playtime will come the second major selling success in Playtime Corporation's lifespan, this time the creation of a toy named Huggy Wuggy. The purpose of this toy was its ability to give children hugs using its long arms and pleasant and welcoming demeanor. It became one of Playtime's most successful products, and was quickly considered a signature toy alongside Poppy Playtime. The company looked to take a double dip on the Huggy Wuggy concept, releasing a feminine counterpart called Kissy Missy only a year later. Little is known, however, on how well Kissy Missy sold, since it's actually not mentioned thus far. It's not until the late 80s that Playtime released their new series of toys called the Swapimals. The concept was essentially two animals mixed together. Genius. The two new toys released for this line were Catbee and PJ Pugapilla. Both sold well, but still failed to compare to the selling power of Poppy Playtime and Huggy Wuggy. It's in 1989 that Playtime would create one of their biggest controversies. Catnap. He would be introduced with a whole new line of toys jointly named the Smiling Critters. The line consisted of Bobby Bear Hug, Bubba Bubbaphant, Crafty Corn, Dog Day, Hoppy Hopscotch, Kickin' Chicken, Picky Piggy, and of course Catnap. They would receive their own cartoon series of the same name in an attempt to advertise the new Playtime Co. toy line to the public. The popularity was instantly felt, and they would quickly become the new main mascots for Playcare, as well as now introducing new toys for the Bigger Bodies initiative to use with different orphans. The toy line, however, was not all sunshine and rainbows. It did have some serious hiccups. The Catnap toy had some serious manufacturing faults, which had a small toy spill out the red smoke mixture that was being used within Playcare instead of the intended lavender extract. This caused any child in possession of a Catnap doll to experience serious and violent nightmares. This got the attention of the media due to some bad press about the Catnap doll, and Playtime was forced to recall the Catnap dolls completely and even removed it from the Smiling Critters cartoon and advertisements going forward. Leith Pierre takes it upon himself to look into the Young Geniuses program, looking at lists of its former participants and current statuses. It's during this investigation that he stumbles across the profile of a participant, Harley Sawyer. He sends a letter to Sawyer, introducing himself as the head of innovation at Playtime Co. He throws a mild insult towards Sawyer, who is now Dr. Harley Sawyer, a neuroscientist of little reputation. Ouch. He points out that Sawyer is not a major player in his field, but he does have ambition and grand ideas. He offers Sawyer a chance to put those grand ideas and ambition to the test, with a project of a lifetime. He asks Harley Sawyer to meet him in person to discuss the details on January 15th of 1990, stating that this is Sawyer's way to get ahead, and this is the opportunity that he's been waiting for. While no year is given, we do know that at some point by 1990, Elliot Ludwig is dead. He was found dead within his estate, along with an eviscerated young child, also within his estate, which tarnished his reputation and legacy. We still don't have any confirmation, but it is heavily suggested that the person responsible for Ludwig's death is Harley Sawyer, likely seeking revenge for his rejection and removal from the Young Geniuses program. But again, this is not confirmed. It is during 1990 that Playtime Co. and Warren Buck Construction Company renew their previous contract, this time with the added print that Warren Buck Construction will build anything that is requested by Playtime Co. and will be finished within a reasonable time frame, while also being reasonably compensated for the work if done within said time frame. There are numerous VHS tapes found throughout Project Playtime that give us a perspective on just who Harley Sawyer was. Firstly, Harley found out that Playtime Corporation, the biggest toy manufacturing company on the planet, was actually doing secret experiments on rats. Elliot Ludwig was experimenting on a rat, changing its feeding cycles and submerging it within a gel-like mixture made from poppy flowers. He thinks that the properties of the poppy flower offer life-altering properties, and it's attempting to revive the rat after a week of being submerged within the gel. We can see at this stage that the experiments have failed, but he is interested in the idea that something larger could yield different results. Harley knew that the company could face bankruptcy if the public were to find out and they were to get sued, so he decided to find a solution to the problem. In a VHS tape, we can see the moment that Sawyer approached Playtime Co. about their experiment issues, which he believed stemmed from declining profits and the fact that lower-level employees that should have no knowledge of such experiments actually witnessed it with their own eyes. It was a lawsuit waiting to happen, so Sawyer proposed an idea of developing large toys that would increase the workforce and also cut staff costs at the same time. It also lowers the chances that an employee would talk to outside sources about what they've been witnessing within Playtime. A win-win all around. He calls his solution the Bigger Bodies Initiative, and requests that he oversee and lead the project. something which Playtime eventually agreed to. They would go on to build a factory within Playtime called the Game Station. It would work hand in hand with the Bigger Bodies Initiative and Elliot Ludwig's earlier experiments. This required the testing of human subjects, notably orphans. Playtime Co. built another facility much earlier called Playcare, far below the Playtime building. Playcare acted as an orphanage, housing orphan children in a manufactured sphere. Elliot believed it was a place that could help a child muster a smile. It contained a school, housing, and a play area for the children. The children of Playcare would be sent to the newly built game station to play games, but in reality, they were being tested. Each orphan would have a Playtime Co. toy assigned to them. Think of it almost like a moniker. They would then go through the 3 games presented within the game station, and proctors would assess their brain speed, efficiency, reaction time, problem solving, physical endurance, agility, and the strength of the child, rating them on a scale of 5 stars using nearby observation rooms. This was of course something that the orphans were unaware of at the time of playing, instead thinking that they were just playing games. It is unknown when these employees were actually hired, but at some point Playtime Co. hired somebody named Stella Graybar. Little is actually known about her, other than the fact that she was responsible for the assessment of the children from the game station. Proctors would send their assessment forms of all of the orphans to Stella for review, and it's also shown at some stage that Stella was put in charge of Playcare at some point also. If the orphan performed well and Stella signed off on it, the child would be taken from Playcare from Dr. Sawyer and used in experiments associated with the Big Bodies Initiative. See, Sawyer was attempting to turn these orphans into their assigned toy at the time of testing, a procedure that was incredibly difficult and required the use of poppy gas, refined from an earlier experiment of Elliot Ludwig. After the Bigger Bodies Initiative was implemented, Playtime was able to use them to fulfill a variety of jobs and tasks, ranging from security and child management within their game station. It acted as an automated process for Playtime. No paychecks, no breaks, and more importantly, no risks. This was also the year that another toy was created, this time Mummy Longlegs. She had elongated and stretchy arms that allowed children to bind her around any surface and have her hang, a bit like a spider. The reason for this was Playtime wanting to test their new stretchy plastic material, and they used Mummy Longlegs as a device to do so. We know that shortly after the meeting with Laith Pierre, Harley Sawyer would begin taking part in Playtime's experiments. We have a few testing notes that show some of the earlier experiments, created after the prototype but still early enough that almost all of them were failures. Experiment 1015, for example, was spoken about by Sawyer, and how its neural reactivation failed, saying that the use of systematic tissues seemed initially promising but it yielded no results. The subject ultimately failed, but this doesn't discourage Sawyer at all, saying that this is simply a new field of science and there is no clear path ahead. We also see experiment 1026, an experiment that was alive for only 45 minutes. But only 3 of those minutes actually contained anything resembling a conscious state. During its first signs of awakening, 1026 sat upright and was startled by something. It began blinking at the other end of the observation room. The staff quickly began checking equipment and proceeded to ask 1026 questions, but they would get no answers. It did, however, look at the person speaking to it and was able to track moving objects, such as the staff's index finger when prompted. 1026 would then lay back and close its eyes. Only a few minutes would pass before its blood pressure began to fall and would eventually die. Attempts at resuscitation were ultimately not successful. 1160 is also noted in testing notes by Dr. Sawyer. 1160, while a failure, also created a breakthrough in what was possible within this brand new science. Sawyer points out that they are no longer tied to the size or the morphology of the test subjects, meaning that all experiments prior to 1160 were actually contained to the size of the child that was used to create them. 1160 represents a new approach to the project, proof that it can be done. He will be the first of this new initiative, the best of these bigger bodies. They'll continue to improve their procedures, and on top of that, Laith and his money men will be finally happy. They will have their investments and see money saved, which means that Sawyer will be able to continue on with his work. He views the findings of 1160 as extremely promising. It was in August of 1990 that experiment 1166, aka Yarnaby, was created using Playtime's preferred orphan for the toy, Quinn Navidson. Quinn was considered a troublesome child by the Playtime staff, usually ripping the heads off of toys and switching them with other toys. In fact, it was even noted that Quinn bit off one of the heads of the plushie toys during his Whack-A-Wuggy game at the game station testing. He was considered average in his game station tests. Nothing great, nothing bad, but it was of the opinion of Dr. Harley Sawyer that Quinn was possibly holding back deliberately in the tests, believing that Quinn wanted people to have lower expectations of him. Sawyer would take an interest and was able to successfully manipulate Quinn into believing that only he could see the real him hiding inside, convincing Quinn to perform at his very best, unhindered, and give everything that he had to succeed during his next testing. He would go on to perform considerably better at all of the tests, except the musical memory, and would be selected to become Yarnaby. After the surgery to turn Quinn into Yarnaby, we can see a prisoner profile that was written by Dr. Harley Sawyer about 1166, this being the newly created Yarnaby, and mentions how he lacks higher cognitive function, complex reasoning, and is generally unable to process simple speech. Physically, he is strong and agile, but Sawyer was hoping for a smarter mind behind the beast. 1166 does, however, show an odd sense of loyalty towards a select few of security staff, much like a cat or a dog would act towards a trusted owner. He wants to bend or twist that loyalty, saying that improvements can be made, but 1166 is a funny little creature. It sits in the corner and it watches, something that Sawyer gets a good laugh out of. He plans on isolating Yarnaby, giving him absolutely no contact with anyone except himself, saying that he is extremely important to the program and it's only right that he's protected at all times. Not to mention how he can always just get a laugh out of the pathetic little noises that it makes. By the time he's done with it, Sawyer will be his entire world. It will know nothing else. In November of 1990, Experiment 1172 had their procedure, leaving them extremely stressed and having episodes of shaking, heavy breathing, decreased concentration, and emotional deregulation. Another significant event that took place in this year has to do with a child within play care named Theodore Gramble. He was a 7-year-old boy that was considered troubled by the play care counsellor, Joel Sinclair. Theodore regularly spoke and made drawings about a friend of his. Sinclair believed this to simply be an imaginary friend, hardly unusual for a child his age. In reality, this imaginary friend of Theo's was not imaginary at all. It was another experiment that was conducted by Playtime, that was created at an unspecified time in the past called the Prototype, or Experiment 1006. This was the first ever successful project that Playtime ever did in their attempt at creating an ideal worker for the Bigger Bodies initiative. Prototype has shown to have a very high level of intelligence, being able to take advantage of security weak points to get the upper hand on Playtime Co staff. Numerous VHS tapes can be found of interviews held by Dr. Sawyer with Experiment 1006 that shows its ability to mimic voices and study the different staff members at Playtime Co. Prototype was secretly speaking to one of the orphans, Theodore Gramble. He would go on to gain the trust of the young boy and convince him to steal one of the Playtime grab packs and use it to open a maintenance door inside of Playcare with the hopes of escape. Unfortunately, due to Theodore's young age, he did not properly understand how to operate the Playtime grab pack and electrocuted himself on the door, requiring immediate medical intervention to save his life. Both the school counselor, Joel Sinclair, and Playtime pediatrician, Thomas Clark, collectively concluded that Theodore's imaginary friend was actually real, since 2 people were required to open the maintenance door, and Clark even reported seeing Theodore's friend with his own 2 eyes. Theodore would later be taken in for emergency medical care after the accident, with Dr. Sawyer deciding to try and implement Theodore into the Bigger Bodies initiative since the opportunity arose. They assign him the toy of Catnap, despite numerous other orphans being considered for that particular toy. The procedure is said to have taken 4 hours longer than expected, but overall was successful, thus turning Theodore Gramble into the monster version of Catnap. He would act as a type of protector for the children within Playcare, and have the ability to help the children sleep using the red gas developed by Playtime. This would also assist staff in taking different orphans away during their sleep, so as not to rouse suspicion from the other children, blaming their absence the next morning on illness. An employee named Patty Hall would be disciplined for sabotaging a retail shipment, mismatching 57 paint canisters, resulting in a huge amount of toys that would not be able to be sold. The revenue loss was significant, and Playtime Co. suggested that they had evidence to show for it as an act of defiance against the company. Paddy would be demoted and sent downstairs to storage for further instruction, likely being killed down there. However, Theodore, aka the monster version of Catnap, remained within Playcare, which was unknown to the public. A report can be found regarding Theodore's procedure and what happened shortly after. Stella Graybar mentioned how the children reacted to the bigger body's version of Catnap, with half of them being terrified and breaking into tears. Stella had reservations about 1188 in Playcare, but the children have warmed up to him since their first meeting, even regarding him now as a friend, saying that Catnap is gentle and even shy, but Stella is now pleased with his overall impact thus far. Laith Pierre points out that Catnap had erratic behaviour in the weeks following the experiment, which has now calmed down. He does mention his concern, however, over the relationship between 1188 and 1006, otherwise known as Catnap and Prototype. Apparently, whenever the two are in the same room, Catnap follows Prototype around like a lost puppy, and Prototype doesn't seem to mind at all, noting the risk that Prototype could influence Catnap in the future. A Playtime employee by the name of Marcus Brickley, played wonderfully by fellow YouTuber Jacksepticeye, has an interview with Laith Pierre regarding a sighting on a long creature with what he described having 50 legs during his shift at Playtime. This was later revealed to be the monster version of PJ Pugapilla, the toy released in the 70s under the Swapimals toy line. This gives us our first example that not all employees at Playtime were aware of the Bigger Bodies initiative, and that it was on a need-to-know basis within the company. We can also come to find out that around this stage that Playtime Co. has been successful in creating numerous other experiments that serve the Playtime factory in numerous ways. For example, Experiment 1170, otherwise referred to as Huggy Wuggy, has been developed into a monster form from an unnamed orphan. He serves as the factory's security, while Experiment 1222, otherwise referred to as Mummy Longlegs, serves as the game station host and carer for the orphans while they undergo their trials. Boxy Boo, which also has a monster form, is responsible for dealing with any and all lower-ended employees that might learn about the Bigger Bodies initiative, disposing of them so Playtime doesn't have any intel leak or potential lawsuit on their hands. The head of information technology, Rowan Stoll, makes contact with Laith Pierre about the possibility that Huggy Wuggy, who is disguising himself as a statue during Playtime tours, could hold nanny cameras within its eyes, since he has had multiple guests complaining that the Huggy Wuggy statue is staring at the children, something that Stoll believes to be true. This shows that Stoll was also unaware of the Bigger Bodies initiative at the time of this report, despite being a higher-ended employee at Playtime Co. It is at this stage that we can see that Rowan Stoll has more likely than not found out about the Bigger Bodies initiative, and is now attempting to go back on his earlier reports to Pierre, saying that he interviewed the maintenance guy and found that he just simply failed to lock Huggy Wuggy's eyes in place, causing them to dangle out. A clear lie, but informed Pierre that there would be no more videos about these instances from him. Rowan Stoll makes a note over an old employee confidentiality agreement, stating that he will soon be killed. He feels that Playtime Co. are aware that Rowan knows about the initiative, and have been writing him up for disciplinary measures consistently since his last report in May, mentioning that only 4 days prior somebody loosened the bolts on his car wheels, causing him to almost die in a car accident. He plans on escaping and fleeing Playtime Co., but intends to first expose the Bigger Bodies initiative to the world in just 1 week's time, using the server maintenance shutdown as a window to upload the evidence. He is also aware of a creature that eats people, and believes that he will be the next target of this creature, even mentioning how Laith Pierre is now a completely different person to his normal self, and is now clearly scared of him. Rowan Stoll attempts to upload his findings onto the server, but is consumed before he can upload anything by the creature that he feared in his previous message, revealed now to be Boxy Boo. It is on this day that Huggy Wuggy is seen on camera, making an escape attempt. Staff alerted Playtime Co. security and they went into an almost immediate pursuit. This would result in the death of 5 employees and 6 would be missing. Huggy Wuggy was eventually caught using tranquilizers, but the damage caused was considerable. Laith Pierre would go on to blame the incident on staff's negligence. It is here on Christmas Day of 1992 that a young kid named Jack Ayers would receive a Doughy the Doughman toy as a present from his parents. Not to mention, an invitation to visit Playtime Co. Almost a month after the invitation, Jack, along with his mother, attend a tour of Playtime. Jack, while being extremely curious about the vats below, actually falls into the vat, containing dough that was used to create the Doughy the Dough Man doll. We can actually see the incident report regarding what happened to Jack by the employee that was guiding the group through Playtime, Brendan. He mentions how he struggles to remember what happened, and that it's all a bit jumbled up in his head for some reason. He talks about how they usually have no problem on the walkways around the vats, but since this group was so big, the back of the group dragged behind and he heard a scream. He cites some possible reasons as to why the incident occurred, such as bad safety equipment, some poor parenting, or maybe Jack's just a stupid kid. He finishes the report by asking that none of the consequences for what happened come back to him, telling Playtime to take whatever they want but not to tell anyone that it was him. He's just a kid and he has a future, and he does not want this to hang over him. Tell the parents, tell the news, and tell everyone it wasn't his fault. One of the worst incidents in Playtime's history took place at some point in 1993, properly called the Theatre Incident. It mentions that numerous visitors to Playtime, 66 or more, people actually died during the incident, and also 12 or more extraction staff died during it also. It created such a controversy that a meeting took place between Leith Pierre, Eddie Ritterman, and Stella Graber, while investigator Gerard Lockhart investigated the incident to find out who was responsible. Stella is feeling guilty about the whole thing, asking if they did the right thing covering it up. Leith Pierre points out that they did the right thing, and that whoever is responsible will be killed. Eddie reminds Leith to remain calm, and to wait until all the facts are presented. It isn't long before Gerard Lockhart interrupts the meeting, giving evidence to the group that the person responsible was none other than Dr. Harley Sawyer. It is within this year that Playtime Co. released the Boogie Bot toy to their toy line, which was said to actually be a big success with customers. On the 3rd of March 1994, we see that Warren Bart Construction has issued a warning to all people involved in the constructions of the lower levels of Playtime facility to be cautious of using heat-based methods or any use of combustion in areas containing red smoke, saying that it is highly combustive and that lower levels of the facility are not yet equipped with the appropriate filtration system to make these areas safer like the upper levels. On August 8, 1994, one of the Playcare orphans, Riley, writes her first entry into a journal that was given to her by her counsellor, Claire Harper, in Playcare. She is tasked with creating 2 lists, the things that are currently most important to her and why. This is used to help Riley deal with the trauma of losing her parents and help her open up more, and to find out if her life really matters and if the lives of her parents really mattered. Since she's scared that since anything can happen in an instant that can just leave you with nothing, then nothing truly matters. A weekly checkup was conducted on the 23rd of December 1994 on subject 1172, looking into how 1172 was dealing with the high levels of stress that actually stopped her from being able to complete the many tasks given to her by Playtime. She is showing gradual improvements after being allowed supervised socializations with other subjects within the block, and has now shown much less emotional episodes and shortened duration when they do occur. Thanks to the improvements, 1172 has moved to Storage B to work quietly, without further procedures needed to rectify the emotional abnormalities. On January 14th of 1995, Riley wrote her second entry into her journal. She speaks about how the children around her are talking about being chosen, saying that Riley struggles to understand, thinking that they may mean chosen for adoption. She decides to think about whether she even wants to be adopted, and tries to feel what the other children are feeling every single day, since if she was happy like them, then maybe she could appreciate everything more, and then maybe she might want to be chosen too. At some point in January of 1995, Subject 1424 undergoes their Bigger Bodies Initiative procedure. February 10th, 1995 is the final dated journal entry from Riley, the rest are all undated. She has been chosen by Dr. White, and for a while she hasn't known where she wanted to be, but finally she is happy. She's had a bunch of interviews, and many didn't like her, saying that she's too quiet or too anxious, and that she doesn't get along with the other kids. However, somebody must have taken a liking to her, since they've agreed to let her keep her journal. She hasn't felt like this since before her parents' accident, and Claire Harper, her counsellor, has helped her a lot in recent moments deal with her grief. She looks forward to trying to grow into a woman that her parents would be proud of, and also to make more friends and to stay happy. Even considering the idea of opening her own orphanage like Elliot Ludwig has done here with Playcare, and to help care for and teach children in the future. On April 21st of 1995, Subject 1424 has their weekly checkup. They are suffering from thought disorder, confusion, memory loss, disorganized behavior, and catalepsy. 1424 seemingly has little to no true awareness. Its speech is incoherent and mumbled, with it being disconnected from its surroundings. It's noted that it suffers from rigidity of the body and a loss of muscle coordination, and during one of these states, staff could raise one of its arms, and the subject wouldn't lower it, even seemingly showing any sign that it was even aware of what just happened. It will only eat food if it's placed directly into its mouth, and only occasionally respond if it's called by its birth name. There is probably no date more important than this in the history of Playtime Co., since this is the day where the prototype, otherwise known as Experiment 1006, set up an incident later known as the Hour of Joy. Think of it as almost the Playtime equivalent of Order 66. All of the toy creatures simultaneously turned hostile and killed every human being within the factory. This correlated with the transportation of Kissy Missy to Playcare as part of the Bigger Bodies contingency plan. But she would go on to break free from her constraints during the Hour of Joy and murdered the employees tasked with moving her. From the knowledge that we currently have, only 2 employees are known to have actually survived this event: Laith Pierre and an unnamed employee that would later become the protagonist for the main series years later. There is, however, technically a group of survivors that remain unnamed and are the protagonists during Project Playtime. The toys would go on to dispose of the employee corpses by dragging them down to the lower levels of the factory and would actually use them as a source of food. Laith Pierre would later send survivors down to collect toy parts, and this would be the events that transpired during Project Playtime. The survivors would be hunted by Boxy Boo, Huggy Wuggy, and Mummy Longlegs. Eventually, Playtime Co. stopped sending in survivors, and the Bigger Bodies initiative came to a close as a result. This would lead to a food shortage for the monsters that remained within the facility, and would lead them to eat smaller experiments to stay alive. The toy and the toy parts would be grafted onto Experiment 1006. Ultimately reviving them and keeping them alive for the next decade despite the food crisis. We have a reconnaissance report within Playtime facility on the 15th of December 2004. It mentions how the Doctor has booby-trapped much of the construction tunnels with freezing traps in order to restrict Dewey's movements, and losing Dewey would be catastrophic for them since they rely on him so much and he protects them. They're attempting to figure out the best course of action for escape, listing each of the cell blocks and reasons as to why they wouldn't be successful escaping if they went there. They seemingly decide on the barracks, which contains a security system that could totally kill them all, but they are not really sure if it's still operational, deciding that their best bet is going to the place that might kill them instead of the place that they know will kill them. Another reconnaissance report can be found for the 10th of January 2005. The prototype has continued to find ways past the traps, and they're unsure how. They have to keep changing the setups. The prototype spent the night right outside the security door, staring and tapping at the wall. They've double-checked every instance and made sure that the place is good and locked down. They are unsure how long the defenses will last, but they are now completely surrounded, all sides, above and below. This is the end of the line. There is no place left to run or hide. As we now head into the present day of Poppy Playtime, I'll be going over each of the chapters and the events that happen within them in order, and we will have some fun with it. Since large amounts of information is found throughout these chapters, there might be a little bit of overlap with documents already discussed, but there is a bunch of undated context that will provide a more complex explanation, not to mention a bunch of stuff not even covered yet. Enjoy. An ex-employee and survivor of the Hour of Joy receives a letter from a supposed surviving employees within the old facility, and would take on the responsibility of returning to the Playtime factory in search of them. This would lead us into the story shown within Poppy Playtime Chapter 1, and subsequent chapters thereafter. At the current point of creating this video, there have only been a total of 3 chapters released, with the third releasing only a few weeks ago, and I will continue to update this list with future updates. However, now it's time to get into what actually happened for the ex-employee as they travel through the facility. I will add, there will be a slight overlap with information that was already given, since most of the information is found throughout the journey, but we will expand further on what is found. There is also a significant amount of information found that is not dated, and all of that will be included in the 3-chapter breakdown. So without further ado, let's get into the events that transpired for the ex-employee. We're given a very small piece of background information as we head into our new story. Firstly, we are an ex-employee of Playtime Corporation and have returned to the factory after everybody within the factory went missing. A short video plays as the gentleman tells us about a brand new doll named Poppy that has just been invented, calling it the most intelligent doll in the world. Poppy can apparently have an entire conversation with a child. It actually has the ability to answer questions, and they even have a goddamn advertisement for it. For just $2.99, you too can be murdered by Annabelle's distant cousin. Come, join us at Poppy's Playtime. Yeah, I don't think so, pal. We get ourselves a letter stating that everybody thinks that the people disappeared 10 years ago, but they're all still there, and to just simply find the flower. If you've been missing for 10 years, and you're sending me cryptic messages in the mail, you better believe I am not replying to that crap. That is some serial killer type of bait that quite frankly I will not fall for, but we wouldn't have a game if we had common sense, so here we are, inside one of the creepiest damn buildings imaginable. We have trains that move on their own, and decade-old VHS tapes that we can get some backstory from. Firstly, we hear about a man named Leith Pierre. He is the head of innovation at Playtime Co. Toy Factory. The tape in question is actually played on loop whenever the factory is empty, so he points out that if you're hearing this tape, that means that you're an intruder. Playtime Corporation specializes in both children's toys and deadly security protocols. He gives us a warning telling us to leave if we know what's good for us, and of course we choose to ignore that threat and face the threat head on. Another VHS tape explains a contraption used around the factory called a grab pack. It's essentially a jetpack with hands. Something I think that even Elon Musk would be quite proud of, to be honest. Introducing our very first creepy puppet. Created in 1984, this is Huggy Wuggy. Yes, that is the name. Remember that these hellspawns are meant for children. Huggy Wuggy is considered by Playtime Corporation as being one of the best toys for connecting people together. The founder of the company, Elliot Ludwig, created Huggy Wuggy with the intention of being able to hug you forever. It was a success by using Playtime Co.'s 4-step process to create lifelike toys, and is actually the most popular and best-selling toy that they have so far. Doing some puzzles gives us a key and we can continue further into this hellscape. We have to divert some power around and find a company poster that pretty much points out that old Pierre didn't like getting spooked very much. When we arrive back out, Huggy Wuggy is gone. Of course it is. Another VHS tape suggests that Huggy Wuggy's boxes have been going missing on a regular basis, according to the workers, mentioning how the toys are meant for orphans, since the whole hugging thing. But they've been getting a lot of heat from the higher-ups for constantly misplacing the boxes. We get ourselves our first upgrade by finding our right hand for the grab pack, and head further into the facility. This time to a type of toy assembly area called a Maker-Friend. Elliot Ludwig invented the Maker-Friend machine in 1960 and is deemed one of the most creative, impressive, and advanced things that he has ever created. It is solely responsible for every single Playtime Co. toy sold on the market today, using parts and paint to assemble the toy, and can even do a quality inspection on its own. Essentially, this machine is responsible for probably hundreds of people losing their jobs, in all reality, but quite an impressive piece of machinery, especially for the 1960s. Another VHS tape is an interview with a Playtime Co. employee named Stella. She is asked why she wanted to work at the facility, stating that she has loved playing with toys when she was young and seeing it as magical, and she wanted to provide kids with the same magical experience that she felt as a kid. Then she goes really deep and quite morbid, explaining how you don't really ever stop being a kid. Your body just gets older and older, and while you're still a kid deep down, you just sort of get old until you die, pointing out how human bodies can't handle getting older, while things like trees can stay alive for much longer than a person. The oldest person to ever live is still younger than most trees, pointing out that being young is always relative to something else. Just the sort of morbid conversation that we need from our child toy maker employee. Great stuff. We get the machine up and running and begin feeding parts into the Maker-Friend machine until it pops out this little cat bee thing. Using the toy, we can exit the room, since nobody can leave without a toy. Holy crap! Some frantic running through the tunnels, and some close calls later, we can find writing on much of the tunnels, saying things such as stop, turn back, and danger. We send Huggy Wuggy on his way into the depths of the facility, which is apparently hundreds of feet deep. Surprisingly, they seriously have an entire evil lair here. What is also quite interesting is the fact that Huggy Wuggy, which is supposed to be a toy, seems to be leaving an awful lot of bloodstains wherever it hit on his way down. A great lack of stuffing, which is quite concerning to say the least. Another VHS is a log of an employee in relation to something codenamed 1006, named the Prototype. It mentions how coordination and cooperation are part of its skill set, much like the other experiments of his type, pointing out that the missing people are likely in relation to him, and that his absence was a flaw in the scientific process, since he should never have been unaccounted for. This log serves as a lesson and warning going forward to new employees. Future experiments are to be contained and disposed of in a secure location. The person speaking goes on a bit of a rant about how great he is and what this means for science before biting the bullet, just like the rest of them. We can find the big flower that references the flower mentioned at the beginning on the letter, from the missing people. Totally not a trap at all. Not to mention our little bee cat friend from earlier is now hung from the roof, with blood on it, and numerous written warnings. So, nothing ominous about this situation in the slightest. We head inside to a much better decorated area, if I don't say so myself. Look, they actually have wallpaper and lights. There is, however, a creepy room down the hall that leads directly to the Poppy doll. Remember when I called Poppy the cousin of Annabelle? Well, I mean, look at the casing. You cannot tell me that that is not a reference to the real doll. Poppy awakes and mentions how we opened her case, and it cuts to black. And thus marks the end of Poppy Playtime Chapter 1. However, I do want to share a hidden VHS that could be watched on the Mob Entertainment YouTube channel, which gives some insight into Poppy. The VHS tape is titled Poppy Playtime Doll Maintenance Video, and had a clear warning to not actually continue watching the tape. A warning that we will continue to ignore, because this is a horror game, damn it, and we will never heed any warnings. First step, paint her face. Second step, polish her shoes. Then we just skip 3 steps and brush her hair. Now we've thrown steps out altogether. What the hell is going on here? So it seems that Poppy also has human blood, and the maintenance person has removed what appears to be a device from her back. She is all better now, still creepy as all hell, but better. Timeline-wise, we're jumping off where we left off in the first chapter, and we are greeted with another amazing Playtime Co-advertisement. This one is titled Mummy Longlegs, and is dated February 2nd, 1991, and of course contains a spooky face that appears for like a millisecond. It's actually embarrassing how long it took me to pause on this exact frame, but there you go, nightmares, you're welcome. Mummy Longlegs has elastic arms and legs that allows her to tie herself around objects, and do some crazy spider type crap. In normal Playtime Co fashion, we have our advert going from bright, fun and energetic, to dark, dismal and horrible in a matter of seconds. As images of a person running through the city is shown, the voice of Poppy can be heard saying to wake up, and she even makes a subtle appearance with her face appearing in the image. We find ourselves back in the Red Room, now with Poppy missing from the container that she once resided in. It leaves us heading back into the facility as we can see pictures of Huggy Wuggy and another toy. Now it's a little bit of a spoiler, but this character is named Bron. We actually briefly saw the toy version of this guy in the first chapter, but keep his name in mind. We find the door with the name Elliot Ludwig above it. This is the owner of Playtime Co, and we saw him briefly in the video at the start of chapter 1. The door is locked, but the voice of Poppy can be heard calling out to us, telling us which way to go. Again, I don't think I'm going to be listening to the newly released Demon Doll, but we are already so committed at this point. It is what it is. We find a cardboard cutout of Huggy Wuggy, looking much more pleasant than our previous meeting. We can hear his voice now, and to be honest, he sounds a bit like Goofy.
Does someone need a hug?
You can't fool me, pal, I'm familiar with your game. We get the key and open Elliot's door. The room is full of children's drawings and of different Playtime Co toys and messages to Ludwig, not to mention another VHS tape, and a note describing an experiment 814. It mentions an experiment utilizing a live rat. It was fed 3 food portions daily for 2 weeks. At the end of the 2 weeks, the rat was killed and submerged into a poppy flower and preservative gel mixture. A week later, an electric shock was applied to the rat while it was still in the gel, in an attempt to revive it. The rat remained unresponsive. They still believe in the potential of the poppy flower. Its unusual properties lead them to believe that the proper mixture and procedure could actually have life-altering properties. Not to mention that the poppy flower also holds heavy symbolism, something they believe has great meaning, before signing off mentioning that perhaps something larger than a rat would yield different results. This VHS is sort of a type of documentary, explaining just how much of a great man Elliot Ludwig was, with a notable black box placed over his face in each of the pictures of him. The video goes on to explain how much of a hard worker he is, and how he constantly looks to innovate and create new things. In the 1960s, Ludwig lost a close family member, and focused his time into creating the Playtime Corporation, pushing through his issues and depression. Just as it is about to explain the story from the beginning, the tape cuts off, as an ominous noise plays over the tape. Well, back to the corridors. We come to find Poppy as she is attempting to put the power back on, and she asks us for our help in doing so. Once the power is back on, she thanks us for freeing her, and tells us that she would like to repay the favor by helping us out of this place using the train codes that she has. She plans on guiding us and, more importantly, following us throughout the vent system. Poppy can be found sitting next to a giant hole and gets grabbed and pulled down by a long pink arm. An educated guess would tell you that this is likely Mummy Longlegs. We jump down in pursuit, since the spooky demon doll is really our only lead out of here. It doesn't take long until we find Mummy Longlegs with Poppy. And not only does she steal our right hand, but also goes down the saw route and asks us to play a game for the train codes that Poppy was going to give us. We need to win 3 games to get the codes, and if we break the rules, she threatens to gut and eat our insides while we're still alive. Nice. Great. Once again, a lesson why you don't go into anything abandoned with reported disappearances or deaths. It's very simple. We head into the PlayStation and can find more drawings from kids with the Playtime Co toys, showing that they actually really do seem to like Mummy Longlegs. A recording is playing, welcoming us to the game station. The person on the recording is somebody called Stella, the same employee that was having a life or death crisis in the first chapter. The first room we visit is the musical memory game, which involves us building and creating a green hand that will replace our lost red hand. We end up in another room with a bunch of televisions around, and we begin our game. It tests cognitive ability through sequence repetition. You see a color on the screen and a pattern. You need to repeat that pattern. Quite simple really, except for the twist that Bunzo, another Playtime Co toy, is descending from above us. If we succeed, Bunzo goes further up. If we fail, Bunzo gets closer to us and we have a very bad day. Mummy Longlegs arrives but mentions how long it's been since this place has been up and running, and also putting out that old Bunzo there is quite hungry after all this time. We manage to get the puzzle done, till a point that it becomes goddamn impossible, so we hit the big old eject button, stopping the machine. Luckily, Mummy Longlegs thinks that the machine just broke and gives us part of the train code as a reward. We can come across Bron just sitting dormant, and not really doing a hell of a lot in the rejected room. Quite frankly, I appreciate it. It's a nice change. We find a tape and can see a toy speaking while sitting on the toilet. I was 100% convinced that this was Garfield when I first saw him, but apparently he has just been demoted as a toy due to its disgusting nature, with the whole fact that the toy is called Sir Poops a Lot, and its whole gimmick is that it's crapping. I mean, the box even has a bunch of dad jokes. Management literally left a note for this thing saying that whoever came up with the idea should be ashamed of themselves, and quite frankly, I agree. But I'm not sure if the Sir Poops a Lot is a bloodthirsty demon toy just yet, but if he isn't, I'll give him a pass. We get back to the game station and get ready for our special second game, Whack-a-Wuggy. You remember that guy from Chapter 1? Yeah, it's got to do with him. It's time to test our reaction time. A Huggy Wuggy will pop out from the holes around us and we need to hit the crap out of them. Pretty simple stuff. Mummy Longlegs mentions that the toys used to have strings attached to them to stop them from getting too close to the kids, but we of course don't have that luxury. After some Wuggy whacking, we get another congratulations and yet another train code and head back towards the game station. We do, however, get a visit from this friendly chap, a pink-looking Huggy Wuggy, who opens up the door for us and politely lets us through without murdering us. A step in the right direction. This toy is called Kissy Missy. We saw her a few times in artwork throughout Chapter 1 and 2. We get another VHS and... hold up, is that Jacksepticeye? What the hell? I can't say I expected to see him here. Well, it's not actually Jacksepticeye. He's playing a character called Marcus Brickley, another employee here at Playtime Corporation. He describes seeing a creature during his shift that startled him. Explaining to Leith Pierre, he describes it as being 50 feet long with thousands of legs and it's absolutely terrified of it. Pierre tries to dissuade Marcus, mentioning that it was probably just a bunch of people, something Marcus is quick to dismiss. Pierre asks if anyone else knows about this, to which Marcus replies that nobody else knows. This tape is actually quite interesting because it puts a few things into perspective. Firstly, the VHS is called Potential Problem, which doesn't bode well for Marcus's fate. Also, this shows that some, if not all of the General Playtime Co. employees don't actually know what's going on with the living creatures here. Now, if you're wondering what creature Marcus saw, we'll be meeting it very shortly. We arrive back at the game station and can begin our third and final game. This time, statues. We can see a poster as we head into the area of a centipede-like toy. The exact name of this is PJ Pugapilla, and this is likely the creature that Marcus saw. We get into the arena and begin our game. The basis of this is that the lights will flicker from on and off. When they are off, we can move. When they're on, we cannot. PJ Pugapilla here will follow us throughout, trying to catch us. And I mean, look at this thing. It is like the worst puppy imaginable. Mummy Longlegs comes back and explains how the orphan children would come here to play at the facility, and would call her Mummy since she was the closest thing that they had to one. But she feels wronged by them since they would leave her after playing the games. She feels that she was left here to die, and doesn't feel that she deserved that. But since we were a previous employee here, we do deserve it. We start running for our damn life in what is one of the most nerve-wracking games in the facility, I won't lie. We break into the control room and can find 2 more documents. The first is an assignment form written by Sarah Abel. It is a test subject form, stating that a subject named Michaela Hyssop is being assigned the toy of Candy Cat. It is evaluating Michaela's scores throughout the games at the game station, which now appears to have been used to assess orphan children for suitability in some kind of experiment. Firstly, Michaela got a rating of 3 in the musical memory, the rating being between 1 and 5, mentioning that she would get panicked whenever she got the pattern incorrect. In the Wacka Wuggy game, she also got a rating of 3, struggling with the grab pack and was slow to notice them in the first place, but did actually react quite quickly when she did notice them. And finally, she got a rating of 1 in the statues game, the worst score possible, since Michaela wasn't paying attention and apparently was screaming and pointing at nothing. The note ends abruptly with blood in the corner, suggesting that Sarah was possibly attacked while writing it. From the other document found was another test subject assessment form, written by Matteo Lata. It is also for Michaela Hyssop, but this time around her scores are much better, scoring a 4 in musical memory, a 3 in Wacka Wuggy, and 4 in statues. But it also states that she lacks focus on the statues game, pointing out that there's something that's drawing her attention elsewhere. The page ends abruptly also, meaning that Matteo was likely attacked or killed at the same time that Sarah was. We head downstairs as Mummy Longlegs calls out to us, mentioning that we won, and return to her immediately so she can give us the final code. But it is pretty damn obvious that we would not survive that encounter, since she openly states that she wants to kill us. We find another document upstairs, this time a transfer request for Mummy Longlegs, or otherwise known as Experiment 1222. It even states a real name, Marie Payne. It points out that she acts violently towards staff, but motherly towards other experiments since she is very protective of them. The staff view the hostility as problematic, but think that they have a solution. They want to transfer her to the high security maintenance, and have her see the children on a more regular basis, as they believe it would not only improve her behaviour, but she would also be unlikely to act out in front of the children. We find another VHS later that is Pierre addressing the complaints from people about a very large spider that was spotted by staff. He emphasises that no spider that size exists, and that a specialist team will come down here to investigate, and to just continue on with their jobs and quit complaining. Dear God! Oh, I hate jump scares so much, I really do. Mummy Longlegs reminds us just how much she hates cheaters like us, and has decided to play one final game before she kills us. Hide and seek. While running throughout, we can find another document, this time addressed to Warren Barch Construction Company. It is written by Eddie M. N. Ritterman, in response to previous communication regarding the construction of an underground laboratory. The project needs to be in complete secrecy, only to be known by those with the proper authority at the 2 companies. Eddie offers $100,000 in exchange for the secrecy, and is also willing to provide excavation equipment, mentioning that the more independent that they work, the more he is willing to compensate them. It needs to be built within a 12-month period, but more than anything, it needs to be done correctly. This is likely the experimentation area that was mentioned earlier. We keep going into the facility and enter an incinerator to hide from Mummy Longlegs. I don't know how that's meant to work, but sure. Turns out it doesn't do much since she pops back up and continues the chase. That is until we lead her into a compactor, which screws her up something wicked. A hand that resembles Mr. Scissorhands or Freddy Krueger appears and gently pulls what is remaining of Mummy Longlegs under the door. We can find another VHS tape in the next area that mentions an experiment 1006, and we can see the same Scissorhand from before. It mentions how the experiment almost breached his containment, disabling the digital security measures in his room, using pieces to create a laser pointer, which he then used to disable the security camera. This gave him exactly 28 seconds of being unmonitored. When the security camera came back up, the room was empty. A specialist member went in to check and found 1006 hiding in the blind spot of the camera, still within the room. The experiment attempted to escape, but another specialist locked the door in time, while the other specialist remained inside, resulting in a single casualty. It points out that 1006 is considered the most intelligent experiment thus far by quite a margin, as well as a ready willingness to commit serious acts of violence. We now find ourselves above the game station and collect the final train code, not to mention another document asking for windows in the game station since there isn't any. I won't say much more on it since it really doesn't add anything meaningful to the lore, but hey, Dr. Matthew Wason wants some windows. Do with that what you will. There is also a guide to proctoring in the game station. This is likely who Sarah and Mateo were. It gives a step-by-step guide on what they wanted as well. Report to the control station while keeping a minimal distance of 20 yards from Mummy Longlegs due to the hostility mentioned before. 8 AM the train arrives and all the children will be put inside the game station at once. The game order is the same as we did them. Musical memory, then Whack-A-Wuggy, and finally statues. One child should play the game at one time, and their performance recorded as relevant. The qualities being looked at are composure, memory, and pattern recognition and musical memory, hand-eye coordination and reaction time for Whack-A-Wuggy, and finally agility, strength, and speed for statues. Once the children have left, give all the reports to Stella Graybar. We speak with Poppy, who is much more monotone and creepy than before, which I didn't even think was possible. She seems pretty happy about Mummy Longlegs' death, and tells us that it's time for us to leave using the train. We enter the code and begin our journey. The train here really reminded me of the train that we saw at the beginning of Chapter 1 that was moving on its own. Poppy thanks us again for saving her, calling us perfect. Too perfect, in fact, to leave, and changes the route on the train. She goes on to say that she's been waiting so long for somebody to open up her cage. She intends to set things right and believes that we will do whatever we must to help her. The train begins going very fast, and we attempt to slow it down, but it ends up crashing instead. The screen fades to black as Chapter 2 comes to an end. However, just like the first chapter, we have special VHS videos that can only be found on the Mob Entertainment YouTube channel. Firstly, the disappearance video. A man is seen driving a car while talking on the radio. He mentions that they have eyes on 1170 heading southbound. They are trying to cut him off, stopping him from getting to the public roads. We can also see cam footage from the 18th of June 1992, of which 1170 runs from the facility, which 2 staff members saw and hit the emergency alarm. We can see that 1170 is Huggy Wuggy from the footage. Within 3 minutes, security staff and vehicles have begun pursuit, and it's mentioned that Huggy Wuggy has travelled over a half mile in that time frame. They find him and prepare themselves as Huggy charges the car as the security team shoots tranquilizers at him, hitting him once in the left leg, but Huggy flees into the woods. They continue on foot and expand the search zone into nearby residential areas, but the increased range has caused issues with the team's radios. Now, 1 entire hour after 1170 escaped, we can see cam footage of one of the security members that gets ambushed by Huggy Wuggy. I won't lie. These tapes are 1000% scarier than the actual game moments. These toys are no joke, man. In total, Huggy Wuggy killed 5 people, and there is now 6 people missing, all while sounding like the most horrific creature known to man. It took 4 hours to finally locate and successfully sedate 1170. The second tape is called Relocation, dated August 8, 1995. The staff is tasked with moving the giant from storage, the giant being Kissy Missy. They strap her for transport on a bunch of boards and load her onto the train. The tape has been tampered with and has changed the 4th step to loosen the straps binding Kissy. we can see that this is likely the train that we rode at the end of Chapter 2, moving Kissy Missy, while more steps are changed in the tapes. Once arriving at the location, we can see the staff dead alongside Kissy Missy. The final video is called Restoration, as we get a glimpse into the experiment room of Playtime Co. It mentions a test subject named Thomas Clark. He is 59 years old and is dying of cancer, and also notably a previous employee of Playtime Co. since 1955. He has even volunteered himself for experiment, codenamed Bigger Bodies Initiative. The staff can be heard speaking to the Bron toy, asking if Thomas can hear them, and Bron moves his eye. He is even given the 1199 experiment number, and he has displayed cognitive ability, but it is estimated to be roughly half the intelligence level that he previously was as a human being. The staff believe that he probably fails to comprehend what is happening to him and how he became a toy. It's also noted that other experiments have noticed that 1199 is different. We can see footage of 1199 as the other experiments all surround him and actually attack him, almost killing him. The security team jumped in and stopped it, but 1199 still sustained considerable damage, particularly to his thyroid and throat, which were completely devoured. 12 hours of surgery was required to save his life and is now kept separate from the other experiments, and what I would personally describe as a worse fate than death. We open up with an entire animated short of the different toys at Playtime Co. called the Smiling Critters. Is it just me, or is the design choice to go back to having the entire eye black while the eye itself is white just adds this chilling undertone to these characters? The toys are having an issue falling asleep due to the loud winds outside when a knock at the door shows another toy arriving, much to the delight of the others. A purple cat named Catnap. Using a kind of what I would presume is a toxin, it causes them all to fall asleep in the most horrific way possible, and it cuts to a news report, as the reporter mentions how the new Catnap toy might be dangerous for your children to play with. It was intended to release with the same toys feature within the cartoon, as they begin to sell in stores, but it's now facing controversy due to the inclusion of Catnap. See, Catnap seems innocent enough at first glance. We pull his tail and he seems to spray something from his mouth area of the toy. But things have begun to take a turn for the worse since parents are reporting that their children are experiencing strange and violent nightmares. The one thing in common among all of these children? The Catnap doll. Personally, after watching the end of that cartoon, it seemed pretty damn obvious that there is something much more sinister at play regarding that damn company. But at least the parents are finally starting to clue in. Playtime Co. have recalled every Catnap doll released within the Smiling Critters line, and even removed him from all the promotional material. While the cause of the nightmares and dreams is still uncertain, it's clear that your children are not safe with Catnap. Cue the title screen. We continue from our previous story point in Chapter 2, as our main protagonist was knocked unconscious during the train crash, but while awaking we can see that something else currently has us in its grasp and is throwing us down a tube. A giant purple cat. I'm sure it's just a coincidence and not at all related to the cartoon that we just watched. We're in a trash compactor and we need to get the hell out of here quickly, which we do, eventually finding a VHS of Claire Harper. It is an interview as Claire is being asked questions regarding an incident. Claire explains that the children were going to sleep like any other night, while Catnap had the red smoke in the room with them. But suddenly, a scream. Claire mentions that this was not just a regular old nightmare. The pupils were dilated and their lips were quivering. I mean, look, if this was the thing tucking me in at night, I think I would also have the same goddamn reaction. That seems like a reasonable level of fear to me. Claire points out that the child's eyes were darting around the room, and even reported that it felt like her blood was boiling beneath her skin. Claire panics a little at the thought of what that child saw in the nightmare, to which the interviewer assures Claire that she will be getting the best support needed at Playtime Co. But before that, asks Claire if the child described what she saw. According to the child, it was a monster but colourless. Claire pointed out how hard the child's heart was pounding and that her movements were wild, arms flailing and kicking her legs. It was a dream, but for the child it was as real as anything. It was right there in front of her. Claire asked the interviewer if she can see the child again to check up on her since the event, but the interviewer advises against it, saying that they have many concerns that need to be addressed at this time, but assures Claire that the child's vitals are normal and they will continue to monitor her progress. Claire loses it, screaming, telling the interviewer that she isn't comforted by that, before subtly suggesting that the little girl is actually her daughter. We can actually find a note that gives more information on this young girl mentioned by Claire Harper. Firstly, it's an incident report that was filed by Harper, and it clearly shows her as a counsellor within Playcare. It goes over the same description of what happened to the young girl after she awoke from the nightmares, but this time we can find out that the young orphan's girl's name is Marie Payne. This is where it gets crazy. Marie Payne is the same name given to Mummy Longlegs, meaning that the young girl that was experiencing the nightmares and required medical aid is the same orphan that Playtime Co. used to create Mummy Longlegs. It also mentions that a bunch of boys have been picking on Marie, teasing her during playtime. Harper says that it should be addressed, before warning Playtime Co. to not allow anything to happen to her little girl again. We find a phone on the wall ringing and a young child answers. He mentions that he doesn't want us to die and that we look lost, so they plan on helping us, providing us a battery in order to get out of the room. We can even find the train wreckage from before, to which the child points out that Catnap found us in there. He says how mad we must be at Poppy for trying to stop us from escaping, but emphasizes that she needs our help. They need us, and we are their mission, believing that we could save a lot of people. We're pointed towards a place named Playcare, a home of Catnap, and it's mentioned how there used to be 8 of the smiling critters, but now there's only Catnap left, and that Playcare is his church and hunting ground. This, by the way, is a great big example of why we should not go there. Avoid that place at all costs, please, for the love of God. The kid introduces himself as Ollie as we head down the tunnel. We get inside a tram as it begins to move and a film is played. The film in question is narrated by none other than Elliot Ludwig, the creator of this place. He goes on a big speech about a particular thing that he believes the world needs more of. Asking different people, he got a variety of answers, including money, consideration, and faith. But for him, the answer is smiles. He points out that a smile is hope, love, and understanding, and he loves nothing more than being the reason that a child smiles. Creating a world with more hope and love, a place where children can smile and be protected, a safe home. So, Playtime Co. created Playcare, an on-site orphanage. It is its own community and ecosystem beneath the facility, a place dedicated to ensuring a child's smile. I do have to say, by the way, that this sequence really felt inspired by the opening sequence of BioShock. Think about it. The creator of the world giving their world perspective that leads them to create their optimal world. The slow panning shots while the narration plays in the background. Not to mention that both worlds being under something. Rapture was underneath the ocean, hidden away from the rest of the population, much like Playcare, hidden below the facility, away from everybody above. Oh, and also, who else did we speak to over a radio that guided us through the city? Just a thought. When we arrive, it's actually not too bad at first. That is until you take 2 steps and can see the blood on the stairway. Nice. Ollie rings and mentions that kids used to live down here, and now it's a mess. Yeah, no crap. We need to head down below the central statue in order to power everything within Playcare, and this place is quite large. We can find these little boards that show different members of the smiling critters, including Picky Piggy, Hoppy Hopscotch, Crafty Corn, Bubba Bubbaphant, Kickin' Chicken, Bobby Bear Hug, and Dog Day. The one missing due to the rubble is Catnap, of course. We get the key from Ollie and head to the one place that every good orphanage needs, the gas production facility. This is the place that creates the red smoke that Catnap is breathing out. Ollie needs us to divert the remaining red smoke to the left instead of the right. We go about all the puzzles, but somebody turned off the power right before we could get the gas to go to the left, and now we need to turn on the backup generator, which requires us to go to the terrible haunted house up on the hill. Inside are pictures of some of the children that once lived here, and rooms filled with that red gas from earlier. A radio can be found, and when played, it mentions that the body of a young boy was found on the estate of the late Elliot Ludwig, showing that Elliot Ludwig is no longer alive. The child's identity is still unknown, but the remains of the child were found in a duffel bag upstairs in the house. It was reported by police on the scene that the remains had been disturbed, since key skeletal fragments and even organs are missing from the body. It is still open to the possibility that the extraction of organs and bones could have been the cause of death as well. Playtime Corporation were contacted for a statement regarding the news and responded with this, and I quote, "It's sickening. Elliot Ludwig was a great man, and those who knew him understood that he was not capable of such violence, let alone what others now claim. He had a deep love in his heart for children like this one, making the actions of whoever planted this body all the more sick. We look forward to clearing his good name both in the public eye and in the eyes of the law. A phone can be heard ringing down the corridor. Ollie's on the other end telling us to run. And oh my! Yep, right with you on that one, Ollie. The radio continues mentioning how the public still doubt Ludwig's innocence due to his reclusive personality, which lends suspicion to the claim. His neighbours even mentioned how he would return to his home at strange hours of the night and would depart again before the sunrise. The drastic change in voice is a nice touch.
Sunrise. Some believed he was sick. Others that don't move an inch. Playtime Co., it seems.
Not to mention the cat claw marks everywhere. We reach the kitchen of what I can only describe as a literal embodiment of a hell house. We can find happy and fun, why was it done, etched into the wall alongside a VHS tape. If it isn't huggy wuggy, the video is addressed to the staff within Playcare, mentioning all the great things that they're doing for the children here, and also that if they are feeling unhappy about anything going on, the Playtime Co. is here to listen to their every concern. How gracious. Oh, and this.
And should you come back years later, your conscience finally getting the better of you, may you descend into the dark and the dust, finding all that awaits you are incomprehensible horrors, each hungry for your return, each eager that they might find you. Perhaps they'd smile at you from a shadow, their smiling mouths full of teeth and meat and plastic, watching and waiting patiently for their turn at a warm welcome. Or perhaps they won't allow you such time to figure your place in the world you'd left, a world that's theirs now. Welcome home.
Yeah, that's some straight paranormal It type of stuff. Dear God. It catches us and we awake back in the house. It's likely that we saw the nightmare due to the red gas from earlier. A neat observation is the cardboard cutout of Mummy Longlegs. These cutouts have been scattered throughout each of the 3 chapters. Upon pressing the button you get a nice little voice line. But this one of Mummy Longlegs doesn't actually say anything. Instead, it's just static, making me wonder if this is due to Mummy Longlegs getting badly hurt in the 2nd chapter. And if their fate relates to the cutouts, does that also mean that the voice talking is not a recording at all? Instead, it's the actual creature. I guess the smiling critters would have been static also if that were the case, but hey, maybe they're still alive. We use a gas mask to traverse the rest of the house, since the red gas is everywhere, and we find another VHS. This time it is about Subject 1322, who was pulled from Home Sweet Home due to abnormalities in his neural signals. We can hear a voice in the background ask the narrator what Kevin is doing here, asking if he is sick and why he would be taken away. The narrator is clearly concerned, but assures the voice that Kevin is sick and needs help getting better here. He assures the child, who is revealed to be named Joseph, that his friend Kevin is getting the best care that he can. Randomly in one of the rooms, we can find Kissy Missy just sitting, looking at a picture of a child. Considering what we know about the experiments taking place, I wonder if that child was actually her. Another VHS can be found of a bunch of young children asking their teacher who was picked. The teacher informs the student that Dr. White has selected Samuel Lee. Ominously, the teacher asks the class to give Samuel one last goodbye as he heads off with Dr. White. We are to presume that that is young Samuel there in the video. Oh God, it follows us around. I couldn't even imagine trying to get sleep with that thing in the room. Those poor kids. We get the hell out of the house for obvious reasons, after starting up the backup power. As we leave, however, Kissy Missy grabs us and holds us to the ground, but thankfully Poppy jumps in and saves our ass from being toy food. Poppy reiterates that we can help them, and is thankful that Ollie has helped us get to where we are, and mentions that he is the only reason that they found us at all. She rides on Missy Kissy's shoulder like she's Pikachu, and asks us to follow her so she can give us an explanation. Poppy opens up a secret door that has a notable flower on it. The same flower seen at the secret door in Chapter 1, and the letter that we received back there in the first place. She goes on to say that she isn't our enemy, but she also cannot allow us to leave since what is happening here is bigger than all of us. She needs revenge against the monsters who have hurt us. She points out that these creatures are just simply tools of the prototype, the real head honcho behind everything that is happening. The prototype is the claw hand thing that took Mummy Longlegs in Chapter 2. We turn the power back on for Playcare as Poppy mentions how the prototype is the reason that she was locked away in the case for so long, and that it would not allow us to leave alive. She wants us to kill the prototype, since we're proven to be capable, since we killed Huggy Wuggy and Mummy Longlegs thus far. Catnap can be heard as Poppy leaves, mentioning how Catnap is the prototype's final obstacle, and mentions that Ollie will continue to help us. Ollie calls back, and using his guidance, we do some electrical work, restoring some power to the central statue. The crappy part is the fact that we need to reroute power from each area of Playcare. Alright, on to the next one. We head to the school since Catnap apparently leaves that place alone for some reason. Honestly, music to my ears. Oh, never mind. Thought we'd get a break from the killer toys for a moment. Silly me. Another Playtime co-toy begins speaking over the school speaker. This time, Miss Delight. She actually recognizes us and mentions how we used to work here, but is curious how we're still alive. Someone named Barb tells her that we are looking for our co-workers. She tells us to leave since Catnap wouldn't like us, snooping around the school. We find another VHS of Mr. Light asking someone where the children are and if they're safe. The other person doesn't tell her where the children are, but does assure her that they are safe. Then Mr. Light gets a little nuts.
And that was it. That's all he'd tell me. Probably because he knew I'd kill them all.
A note can be found mentioning something called the Hour of Joy, which took place a few weeks prior to the letter being written. It mentions how all the children have been taken from the school and how silent it is now without them, before mentioning how something or someone locked the front door to the school, and the teachers have been unable to get it open since. They heard a knock at the door, something breathing. It wouldn't speak when called out to, and Mr. Light believes that it's likely this thing that's responsible for locking them inside the school. Spoiler alert, it's Catnap. She's created a weapon out of pencils, rulers, tape and twine, which she now calls Barb, intending to use it as a weapon when the door opens. There hasn't been food for days, and Mr. Light feels that she has been singled out to die since they blocked the kitchen with their bodies. She is so starving that all that she can think about is food. She can barely get herself off the floor, but Barb is now speaking to her, telling her to stay completely still so the other teachers think that she's dead. That is until she can strike. Barb tells her how she needs to eat and the other teachers wouldn't see it coming. We continue through the school and Mr. Light threatens us once again, saying that she can't wait to hear how our screams sound and if they sound like the other humans that she's killed. Nice. Another note has Mr. Light apologizing for eating people, saying that they just needed to and they had no choice. Just some casual cannibalism thrown into the mix. We start up the backup power and Mr. Light arrives and shuts that crap down so quickly and gives me the biggest scare yet. She is a bit like those sleeping angels. If you look at her, she won't move, but if you look away or lose sight of her, she will chase you down. It does, however, turn out that gates seem to be her one big weakness. Guess she didn't see that coming. A nearby note shows that Mr. Light and Barb found Catnap at some point and realized that he was the one that shut the door and forced them to eat each other. Mr. Light wanted to kill him but knew that she was not able, instead making a deal with Catnap. They would report what they see to one another, and most importantly, him. I know, it sounds like the meme, he is him, is he him? I'm pretty certain that the prototype is him. We get beneath the school in what I can only describe as the type of Batcave that would make Bruce Wayne jealous. A nearby VHS tape has an ex-Playtime Co-employee speaking to another staff member, most likely Avery, about the poor conditions that he feels that the children are being held in down here, saying that they deserve more than a painted sky and fake walls. This is the same employee that can be heard in the previous 2 chapters talking about his issues with the company. In chapter 1, we heard Avery mention how Rich is the more vocal of the two, always complaining. This complaining actually got Rich demoted in chapter 2 to the rejected room, the same place that Poops a Lot is currently residing. He complained for years to the company, but never got a response. Overall, he seems like a pretty decent guy, actually caring about the orphans, further showing us that not all staff at Playtime Co. were evil or even knew what was happening. This is very easy to miss, but if you take a quick look down, you can see Catnap praying to a type of shrine. I had to grab some extra footage just to see up close, and it appears that old PJ from the Statues game in chapter 2 is not doing all that well anymore. Many puzzles in the Batcave later, and we get through into another area of Playcare called the Playhouse. The rooms are much smaller, as we can see little toys now wandering around this place. Thankfully, our little upgraded handgun allows us to deal with these little suckers. We can find an interview VHS with Catnap, being interviewed by Playtime Co staff. A very interesting point is made when the interviewer addresses Catnap. He points out that he should try his real name before calling him Theo. He tells Theo, or Catnap, that Dr. Sawyer is out at the moment, so he'll be standing in as his replacement. The way it's presented suggests that Dr. Sawyer is not breathing any longer. Theo has been in this new Catnap body for 4 years now, and the interviewer congratulates him for it. However, Catnap has apparently not been getting along well with the kids like the other smiling critters have. But now, with the red smoke, the kids love Catnap. I'm just going to play the game audio for the final part of this interview because I think they really captured the creepiness needed for this thing.
Is his, voice thingy still broken?
Prototype will save us.
Theo, nobody's gonna save you. This prison is where you belong. We'll let you out here and there to go see the kids in Playcare, but your home is here. And as for the prototype, his home is in the labs. This is your life now. Get used to it.
Prototype is in the labs while Catnap is stuck in Playcare. Got it. The place is designed like an adventure course for kids. A bunch of tunnels and obstacles to climb and have fun with. Down in the depths of the place, however, is a bunch of jail cells, which I am almost certain aren't in real playhouses. But then again, it's been a long time since I've been to one of those places. And in one of the cells, we can find Dog Day, looking pretty damn rough if you ask me. Dog Day is a member of the Smiling Critters and was presumed dead since, to the best of our knowledge, Catnap had apparently killed them all, before pointing out that there's nothing really much to save anymore, and that we're in Catnap's home, which means that millions of eyes are now watching our every move, pointing out how they all want to get under our skin and eat us alive. I think he is referencing the little guys that we were annihilating earlier. And if I can be honest, pal, I think that we have them covered, to be honest. I mean, I was using them as literal target practice. Dog Day makes an interesting point, stating that the prototype is Catnap's god, and Dog Day is an example of what Catnap does to heretics. The little guys are scared to get the same treatment as Dog Day, so they just follow Catnap and in return they get fed. The Smiling Critters tried to fight the prototype's control, and as a result, Dog Day is the last of them left, and there isn't even much of him left, to be honest. He tells us to leave and save this place with Poppy before these little critters come out to pay old Dog Day a visit. Oh my, as if things could get worse for him. They somehow did. They possess Dog Day, chasing us out of the area, and we get ourselves back to the surface pronto. Ollie gives us a call and mentions the shrine we saw earlier, saying that Catnap made it in honor of the prototype, not to mention some background information on Catnap. Apparently before Catnap became Catnap, there was a serious accident where he almost died, but the prototype saved Theo's life, giving up on his own freedom in the process. Catnap views Prototype like a superhero that saved this place. Anybody that opposes Prototype gets killed by Catnap, and Ollie even mentions that the shrine is just a smaller version of what the real thing it looks like, which is incredibly worrying. We waste no time and head to the councillor's office, reconnecting power lines. We have another VHS tape of a couple looking to adopt a child named Jeremy from Playcare. This is the same Jeremy that walked in and asked how his friend Kevin was going. However, it turns out that there was some complications, stating that some kind of testing was going on so they wouldn't be able to adopt Jeremy. Oh god. Getting through the office requires us to have a mask on the whole time, since the rooms are full of that red smoke that Catnap loves. However, Catnap does ambush us, and locks us within a room and takes away our mask, causing us to fall asleep and enter one of those nightmares of Catnap. Within the dream, Poppy can be heard asking us to find the flower, and that this place is not easily escaped. We can see the children of the orphanage and the creatures watching over them. Poppy asks us if we know what we're seeing, and if we know what they once were, showing us just why we need to end this place. We can see Huggy Wuggy as the screams of people can be heard in the background, while the prototype looks over. We awake as Catnap gives us a final warning. Leave play care or Catnap will be turning us into beef jerky. I vote to leave, but we're pretty committed this far, so why not? We get all the power together from the places that we've entered, and we have now charged up a big-ass battery. This battery is our ticket out of here, and Ollie is going to help us through the final steps. We get back down to the containers at the red gas and turn the power back on so it diverts the gas to the western side. Catnap arrives and is not pleased by this decision, to say the least. I must say he is looking a lot more gaunt and less furry than normal, but we manage to use the elevator to get out of the room that's now flooded with red gas. We find a log upstairs about experiment 1006, aka the prototype. The interviewer mentions how Prototype has been awfully quiet as of late, but has learned a lot about him anyway. Before he can explain, Prototype speaks again, asking a question. We can hear that Prototype can mimic voices, and doesn't actually have a singular voice, instead opting to constantly change voices throughout a sentence. It's almost robotic in nature. He asks the interviewer if he feels any different, since he sticks them, beats them, and tears at their flesh, speaking as if it consists of multiple personalities instead of a singular person. The interviewer says that there is an incredible secret inside of 1006, and that they will burn and prod until they find it. The interviewer doesn't seem to care how 1006 reacts, saying that anything he does teaches him more about the secret inside of the prototype, and 1006 has a pretty damn spooky response.
Oh, don't fight or give in. Regardless, I learn something new about you every day. It excites me.
Thank you.
You thank me?
Absolutely.
I learn something new about you every day.
Catnap arrives again as we do our side hustle as an electrician, but manages to use the electricity to empower our grab pack and fry Catnap with it. That is until Prototype arrives to help Catnap like before, remembering that Prototype had saved Catnap's life earlier. But this time around, Prototype had different plans it seems, and hits the killing blow, presumably killing Catnap for good. We return to the main room where Poppy is waiting, mentioning how we have successfully diverted the red gas and killed Catnap, but we deserve the truth if we're going to keep going. She plays a VHS tape, explaining that this is what happened to our co-workers that disappeared. After all, that is why we returned to Playtime, saying that it's something that they called the Hour of Joy. In a moment's notice, everyone was killed, as each of the toys came to life.
I remember hearing every moment of it. It went on so long, so agonizingly long. They tried to hide, to run, anything to stay alive. I remember their cries. What's going on? Why is this happening? What are those things? Senseless slaughter, that's all it really was. They killed everyone. The guilty, the innocent, didn't matter. All of that death didn't fix anything. And then, once it was all over, they dragged those corpses down below where they'd never be found. And they ate the bodies to stay alive. Prototype has to die for this, for everything.
So, the Hour of Joy is a pretty damn messed up way of explaining it, but I've grown used to it at this stage. We begin descending down a nearby elevator as we can hear screaming from Kissy Missy above us. We attempt to get back to her but are unable, much to the horror of Poppy. Well, if it isn't another Playtime Company television advertisement, this time Doughy the Dough Man. 4 colours, only $9.99, and it even comes with free nightmares. We see a young boy called Jack getting a Doughy the Dough Man figurine for Christmas, and to much of his excitement, it comes with an invitation to Playtime Company. Jack and his mother visit the company only a month later for their tour. Jack is obviously very fascinated by the vats of dough down below, and why am I getting a really weird parallel here to the Joker with the chemical vats? I'm sure it's nothing. Oh my, Jack is falling from the walkway. This is why you need bigger guardrails. Jack falls into the vat of dough as the other children scream on in the background, and we see an ominous shot of Doughy on the walkway as the Playtime employee shuts off the camera. We return to the elevator as we journey down deeper into the facility. Just after the events of Chapter 3, Poppy intends to go and help Missy, but warns us to be careful down below. Unlike the surface, this area isn't trying to hide what it truly is. Actual hell. Oh boy. We find a note nearby speaking about the red smoke. It is a warning to the employees about using any kind of lighters or heat-producing items down here. It could cause an explosion, if near the red smoke, since they don't have the same level of filtration down here as they do on the surface. I have a strange feeling that explosions will be the least of our concerns while we're down here, but I do appreciate the heads up. I must say, this place could really use a janitor. There is debris and destroyed smiling critter dolls everywhere. And when I say destroyed dolls, I mean it. There has to be like 1 million here. We can find a journal entry from a Riley, a 12-year-old girl near the dolls. It describes her first day at playcare after losing her parents in a fire only a few weeks prior. She talks about how she was given a room, a big pink bed and toys, not to mention the journal that she's writing in. She is struggling to fit in with the other children since they have all been here for most of their lives and don't really know any different, while she still remembers her parents that loved and cared for her. A friendly counsellor told Riley to write thoughts in her journal, only for herself, creating 2 different lists, what is important to her and the other being why it's important to her. She wants to feel more comfortable here at Playcare and understand that not only her life matters, but her parents' lives mattered also. Since anything can change in an instant, she is afraid that nothing actually truly matters. She is comforted, however, with the counsellor that seems to be caring towards her. The second entry is also nearby, this time dated 5 months after the previous one. The kids are speaking a lot about being chosen, and Riley thinks that this could simply just mean being adopted, something that she isn't even sure that she wants yet. She wants to try and focus on whether or not she wants to be adopted, and how she can be as happy as the other children are every single day. Since, if she were happier, she could appreciate everything more, and maybe she would want to be chosen just like them. Since we already know what being chosen means from the previous chapters, believe me, Riley, you do not want to be chosen. Stay sneaky and unseen, that's the key. A month later, in February, Riley was chosen by Dr. White. Damn it! Even keeping to yourself wasn't enough. Riley, for the most part, is happy about being chosen and explains that there were many interviews with couples for her adoption, but she didn't think any of them actually liked her. She was either too anxious or too quiet, didn't get along with the other kids her age, etc., etc. But despite all of these things, somebody did like Riley enough to give her permission to bring her journal along with her. She hasn't felt this excited since the accident. since her parents. Writing has helped her cope a lot, and she's starting to get a more positive outlook on things. Her new list of important things involve growing up into the girl that her parents wanted her to be, and to make them proud, to get more friends and to stay happy. She even wants to open up her own orphanage like Elliot Ludwig, filling it with toys and good people. That is a very commendable goal there, Riley. However, if I may, I think maybe have your orphanage a little less like Elliot's if you can. Minus the whole experiments and nightmare creatures running around killing everyone. If you get rid of those things, you might just be onto something. Speaking of creatures running around, an alarm is set off as little critters invite us for some target practice, scurrying around this toy graveyard. Once we deal with those little guys, we can find another 2 journal entries from Riley. The third is not dated like the others, unfortunately, but she does mention how it wasn't what she thought it was going to be. Yeah, it's so much worse. She mentions how they took her underground, deep below everything, and gave her a shot that made her fall asleep. She describes a doctor performing surgery on her, removing her organs, and even feeling her ribs and spine snapping. Oh God, it's even worse than I thought. When she awoke, everything hurt. Hours of her screaming, but nobody was listening. She quickly realized that her body was not her own anymore. She can't separate her fingers, and her hands are not her own, but she can oddly feel them move. She is in a room much different to the one that she had at the orphanage, and Riley points out that she's been here a very long time, but she just can't remember just how long. She is still writing, even though she's dropped the pen 3 times, still trying to get used to her new hands, and she can't understand why this would happen to her. Why did she survive the fire if this is all that she would get? Her new list is waking up from the nightmare and getting back to being herself since she only just started to like life again, like before. The 4th entry into her journal describes how her room is now moving around as a hole opened up and the room is now upside down. There is screaming from outside the room, but she is doing everything that she can to just hide. Roughly an hour later, Riley decides to check outside and mentions how there are bodies everywhere. Piles of them just looking at her. She calms herself and begins thinking of a plan. I will admit, Riley is handling this situation much better than most people, and Poppy described this place really well. This is hell compared to the surface. We can find a VHS that speaks about an uprising. A doctor is speaking to the security warden. He mentions that somebody helped them escape. The security warden mentions how only himself, Eddie, Stella, and Laith have the ability to get that sort of clearance. The doctor wants to make a deal. Considering the security warden is now sort of stuck and surrounded by escaped creatures that are eating pretty much all of the staff outside, the doctor wants the warden's Omni hand that will give him clearance around the entire facility. In return, the doctor will help the warden escape to safety. He agrees to this trade. We continue further into the facility as our phone begins to call. It's Ollie. He warns us just how bad this place truly is, and that this outside area is actually nothing compared to what we can find inside. He has seen just how bad it is for himself, and he tells us to be careful. I still have my eye on you, Ollie. I'll trust you for now, but I still don't know about you. We get a final entry into Riley's journal. She mentions how this place is a prison, and she wonders what she did to deserve this. What did she do wrong? They made her into this, and then they put her into this cell. There are thousands of others, and how could this happen? She mentions how there is no food here, only bodies, but she refuses to eat them. The conductor for the train that everyone uses to get here is dead, and he has a key. That key makes the train move. So Riley decides to take the key so they can't bring more people here. She'll put it where nobody can find it. She doesn't know how much her life mattered, or if it even did, but she knows that she can do this one thing and make a difference. Maybe it could save somebody, even if it's only one person, that would be enough. Nobody should have to hear what she has inside this place. Nobody should know hell like this, or the demons that live here. Her final list of what is important is that her life mattered to someone. And why? So that she will know that wherever she goes now, hopefully with her parents, that she fulfilled a little bit of what she said she would, and make a life a little better for someone else, even if it took everything from her. We can find the key to the train in the arms of Riley here, showing that even in her final moments she never ate anybody, instead staying here and dying of starvation. I just want to say, the short story of Riley, especially that final letter, is so sad it's incredible. She is an actual hero in every sense of the word, especially for someone only 12 years old. Wow. Rip Riley, man. That is a tape recording between Playtime guards Cole and Norm. They're speaking about the differences in their guard shifts. Cole is working in the Northern District, which is the highest security, but it's largely quiet, while Norm is dealing with the Eastern District, involving a whole bunch of toys banging on the walls and some even crying out for their parents. Cole points out that they aren't even people anymore. They're just animals, sick and twisted, living off instinct. Sounds can be heard in the background as toys begin to break out of their cells. It seems that this area is largely used as a prison for the toys that have only just recently been turned from children by the Doctor, and it's going about as well as every other area of the Playtime facility. We get the train operational and enter the cart in search of Poppy's allies. There is a television inside the cart that turns on as the Doctor begins to speak to us. He calls us a germ, saying that we only survived by the skin of our teeth thus far, when we dealt with Huggy, Mummy Longlegs and Catnap, but down here there is nowhere to hide. The train then crashes as we fall unconscious, and why do I get a strange sense of deja vu? We get a better look at the jail, which is frankly impressive. I think I said this during the third chapter, but Playtime seriously cooked with whoever engineered and built all of these facilities. I mean, it's as messed up as you would expect, but you have to admire the craftsmanship. We find some critters having a lunch break in the cells, while their next door neighbour has done an escape job that would make even Houdini proud. Pay attention to the circle and the colours surrounding it. You'll know just whose cell this was very shortly. We can find a letter describing a weekly checkup of subject 1172. She is described as having emotional deregulation, overactive automatic nervous system due to stress, and episodes of shaking, heavy breathing, and decreased concentration. When given writing tools, 1172 has shown high levels of stress, feeling of impending doom, and a very strong desire to return to her old way of life. These issues have caused 1172 to be unable to complete her assigned tasks, but has gradually improved over time due to being allowed supervised socialization with other subjects. This was Stella Graeber's idea, and it actually helped several subjects better cope with their new bodies. Thanks to these improvements, 1172 will no longer require further corrections through procedures, and will be left to return to her tasks in a quiet setting, this time being Storage B. It seems that even after all this time, the Doctor is still using the jail as his personal experimentation grounds, since he is now putting us to the test, wanting to push our limits and just see how scared we can get. It would sort of help if these creatures were not kind of adorable. It's like getting attacked by a bunch of plushies. Bloodthirsty plushies, I will admit, but still plushies. We pass the test and get to the control room of the jail. It seems they are playing Hang Wuggy in their off time, but I feel the word there might be a little easy to guess. We input the code and make our way to the recreational area, with more warnings from Ollie along the way. We can find a journal entry from our guard friend from earlier, Cole Vaughan. We find out that Cole's job was changed from resource extraction specialist to shelf keeper after the Hour of Joy. He has mixed feelings about the change, saying that he is grateful but is struggling about the loss of his friends. He talks about how the survivors were essentially just given a pat on the back by Playtime and swiftly placed into any new role that they could find for them. For Cole, it's a glorified prison guard, guarding the very things that killed his friends. And Cole was not the only person assigned down here to the prison, as we can see that a large majority of the staff have met their demise during or after the escape that we heard on tape. With the bodies littering the hallways, it really hits home that Chapter 4 is not holding any punches, especially when it comes to the horror element. As we head back towards the control room, the jail fills with the red gas, and the Doctor tells us not to fight. We, of course, don't listen and get our butt the heck out of there. Back inside the offices, we can see a weekly checkup for subject 1424. They have shown signs of confusion, memory loss, thought disorder, disorganized behavior, and catalepsy. Catalepsy is essentially seizures, and it causes stiffness in the body, if you're wondering. 1424 is surprisingly capable of speech, but it is largely incoherent and mumbled, and won't really respond to commands directly, showing an actual disconnect from their surroundings. They will not react to things that happen to them, so, for example, if a staff member raises the subject's arm, they will not lower it, seemingly unaware of what just happened. They'll only eat food that's placed directly into their mouth, and will occasionally respond to their birth name, but it's pretty rare for them to do so. Man, these procedures really do a number on these people, and all of this just for some free labor. We have another experiment, 1166. This subject has shown a much lower cognitive function than what was ideal for the doctors, but physically is able to do everything that's required of them. 1166 does, however, show an odd sense of loyalty towards the security staff, and the staff themselves are showing remorse for the subject, much like you would expect from a domesticated cat or dog. The doctors find this promising, believing that this loyalty shows that it can be bent and twisted to suit. 1166 has a name. It's Yarnaby. It sits in the corner watching the doctor, and it plays funny little music, something that Dr. Harley Sawyer finds very amusing. He intends to isolate Yarnaby so that it will have absolutely no contact with anybody but himself, twisting its loyalty to take advantage and using Yarnaby as a bodyguard while he can get a good laugh out of the pathetic little sounds that it makes. Jeez, this dude is evil. Like, comically evil. I really do think that we could consider putting Playtime Company right up there with some of the worst gaming companies of all time, right next to Resident Evil's Umbrella Company. We reach the doctor's interview room filled with televisions in different rooms. We get locked inside one of these rooms as the doctor speaks to us once again, telling us just how surprised he is to see a human, let alone an ex-employee. But he can tell that we're different somehow, and he intends to find out how. He points out how the previous subjects that we've faced so far, 1170, 1188, and 1222, this being Huggy Wuggy, Catnap, and Mummy Longlegs respectively. He proposes us facing something a little bit different before calling for Yarnaby. And oh my goodness, I hope that glass is bulletproof. We now get the luxury of being hunted by Yarnaby for the next section of the prison as we attempt to escape. We find another prisoner profile, this time subject 1163. It doesn't show much human qualities, much like the other subjects. The subject was described as a bright, joyful, and a bit of a bundle of joy prior to the transition into the toy. Now it's limited and depleted. The doctor is getting sick of creating mindless creatures, saying that 1163 is more like a rabid animal, eating whatever's put in front of it, regardless of its appetite. And it cannot even play the piano rhythms in tune, something that does not intrigue the doctor at all. Dr. Harley sent 1163 for testing, expecting it to probably die in the process, stating that there will be no more experiments like this and that improvements have to be made in the future. As we continue to avoid Yarnaby like the plague, we can find more journal entries from Playtime employee Cole Vaughn. He speaks about Stanley being attacked on duty, which is odd, since Stanley is actually one of the nicer guards down here, even trying to sneak candy and toys to the creatures to try and make them happier. He tried to sneak food to Boxy after hours and was only saved when numerous other guards with tranquilizers noticed that he went into the cell. If not for them, Stanley would be dead meat. Cole couldn't believe how stupid it was for Stanley to walk into a cell like that, especially a big one like Boxy Boo. He went to visit Stanley in the infirmary to ask him why he would even risk it, and Stanley reminds Cole that these are not just beasts, they were once more than that. Cole asks him how he could believe that, with Stanley responding that he's been watching and peeking at the reports that the scientists have been passing between each other. Cole forces Stanley to agree to never do that again and leaves, but has been pondering what Stanley said ever since, saying that it can't be true. They're all 12 feet tall monsters, nothing else. Well, at least somebody at Playtime has a heart. I like Stanley, man. I hope he made it out okay, but let's be honest, he probably didn't, but a guy can dream. Using some of the vents, we make it into the server room and can find another VHS tape. This is a conversation about Harley Sawyer between Eddie Ritterman, Stella Graber, and Laith Pierre. They are mentioning how Sawyer has no regard for the safety of staff, facilities, children, or anything here at Playtime. Despite Stella setting boundaries with him, he just doesn't seem to listen. Laith points out that the Bigger Bodies Initiative, which is headed by Dr. Harley Sawyer, is still a money hole, and this prompts Eddie to suggest actually just getting rid of Dr. Sawyer, making him disappear like the many that they've done before. Laith refuses to kill him, saying that they actually need him even if they don't like it. Stella suggests maybe demoting him, or stripping him from his power over the Bigger Bodies Initiative, especially after the Huggy Wuggy escape into the woods, Catnap's drama, and of course Stoll. They mention how none of these compare to the theatre incident, something that they don't elaborate on further. Laith finishes the conversation with an idea of how to deal with Harley Sawyer without killing him, but the VHS tape cuts off just as he's about to suggest it. Damn it, see, this is why we don't have VHS tapes anymore. The third Cole Vaughn entry talks about his struggle with Stanley's suggestion that the creatures were once more than just rabid animals. He can't wrap his head around the fact that they were once people, thinking they were just some homegrown animals. Cole decides that he is going to find out the truth for himself, but he needs to be careful since punishment here at Playtime is a little more than being fired or yelled at. Being caught snooping around is a very quick way to become Boxy Boo's next lunch meal. Even though the risk is great, too many people have lost their lives to these things, and they cannot be blind to what is actually going on here. Cole does manage to sneak into the archives and gets a prisoner profile document about Dr. Harley Sawyer. Not a name that he's ever heard before, but he will be investigating it further. Stanley might have actually been onto something after all. Oh my, yeah, he was onto something alright. Never too late to get some cardio in, I guess. The VHS collection that Playtime has on hand needs to be studied, as we have Stella Graber and Laith Pierre talking once again. Stella is struggling with seeing the children that she is responsible for being taken for testing, and while she doesn't think that she will shake that feeling, she has done some soul searching and begins thinking about the bigger picture. While it is difficult to lose the children, what they are doing is nothing short of a miracle. Laith points out that Dr. Sawyer was cautious originally about giving the information of the Bigger Bodies initiative to Stella since she had such strong affection towards the children, thinking that it could be a liability. Stella mentions that she took the job to change the children's lives for the better, and while it is hard seeing what is being done to the kids, at least what is happening will one day help so many people, and also other kids in the future. This is for the greater good. I still fail to see how turning people into human-eating toy monsters is a good thing overall, but sure, Stella, yeah, why not? We take a little stumble down into a room below, and I would like to take this time to introduce you all to Pianosaurus, or Subject 1163. Oh, never mind. Instead, say hello to Dowie, otherwise known as Subject 1322. He mentions how he hasn't eaten in weeks, and Pianosaurus really hit the spot for him. He actually seems like a reasonable guy, saying that he won't eat us and that he was told to expect our arrival. Now we get to follow him. Yay. Dowie gives us the running commentary as we follow him, talking about the interrogation rooms and how they would question the subjects after observing them, at least the ones that were able to speak, of course. Dowie begins laughing as he mentions that he never actually told them anything that they wanted to hear. We get another VHS tape about the theatre incident that occurred in 1993, the very same one mentioned by Pierre, Eddie and Stella, but never actually elaborated on. A group of specialists are retrieving bodies of visitors, at a count of 66 people, and a dozen extraction specialists. They wonder how Playtime will manage to push this under the rug considering the severity of the incident. They are wondering where the investigator is. Someone using the name Campbell or Lockhart. Another specialist doesn't feel an investigation is necessary considering it should be obvious who is responsible. Due to the severe muck-up, there are plans in place for a big place to be made for all of these creatures, meaning that people like him and the incidents like this will be a thing of the past going forward. It's not mentioned who they are referring to in this actual VHS tape, but thanks to an ARG recording that we can listen to if you call a certain number, we have a conversation between Laith Pierre, Eddie Ritterman, Stella Graber, and investigator Gerard Lockhart, talking about the cleanup after the theatre incident, and finding who is responsible. They are taking measures to make sure that this incident is not heard about outside the walls of the factory. Stella asks if it was really necessary to do what they did to those people, which Pierre tells her that it was, but regardless, whoever is responsible will be made to disappear, and Lockhart interrupts the meeting and places a folder on the table, telling everybody that the person responsible for the theatre incident was none other than Dr. Harley Sawyer. Now this makes a lot of narrative sense. If you remember back to Chapter 3, you might remember that Dr. Harley Sawyer was responsible for checking up with Subject 1166, aka Catnap. But we came to find out that at some point, Sawyer was taken away from Catnap and play care as Laith Pierre pointed out that Sawyer was now out. Nobody heard from the doctor after that point. And now it seems that this is due to Sawyer being punished for the theatre incident and Pierre ordering his removal. Dowie puts his dough-like body to use and creates bridges for us to walk across as we continue to follow him throughout the safe haven sector. I'm going to take a bet and say it's not so safe. Dowie's voice gets a lot more ominous all of a sudden, asking where Poppy is, and saying that Ollie told him that we're to be trusted and that he really hopes that that's true, for our sake. Oh god. We briefly get split up from Dowie, but we can find a reconnaissance report near the prison yard. This now takes place in 2004, and it mentions how there is no way of escape since the elevators aren't working and the construction tunnels are unpredictable, and likely trapped by the doctor. They mention how Dewey is the only one here that is able to keep them safe, and they just cannot afford to lose him. The northern cell blocks are off limits, since the Doctor uses them, and the eastern cell blocks have a bunch of critters running around, and also is within the Doctor's control. The northeast cells are barricaded, but something feels off there apparently, and the western cells have skeletons and claw marks, suggesting that people were likely kept there after the Hour of Joy, and they don't want the little ones to see that. Then you have the northwest, which only holds bad memories. The barracks, however, runs on its own emergency power, and all the security is designed to kill them, but there is no way to actually confirm if it's still operational without actually going inside. They decide to make a decision on what they know will kill them versus what might kill them, and presumably decide to escape via the barracks. Dewey is kind enough to lead us to the generator they've been using to continue through the facility. It isn't long before we come across a small note, written to the Ayers family. This is Jack Ayers' parents, the young boy that fell into the vat of dough at the very beginning of the chapter. An anonymous person tells them that Jack can live. They request the parents to return to Playtime Co. factory 6 weeks after the letter was sent, signing off as a friend. We are now in the kitchen area, which is some hanging body bags and a trail of blood. Never a good sign. Not to mention a toy mouse infestation, which is probably the worst offence of them all. We're stopped and pulled into a crack in the wall by Kissy Missy and Poppy, while what I can only describe as a monstrous alien-looking creature moves past. It seems on the good side that Poppy was able to retrieve Missy, but her injuries, however, are looking pretty damn severe. We're now in the safe haven with a bunch of little talking critters. Dewey and of course Missy and Poppy. Poppy mentions how Missy needs help and that Dewey is concerned for her well-being, but is oddly curious about Poppy actually being there in front of him. He tells them to seek help in the back while he checks to see if there is something outside the defences. Poppy tells Dewey that it's him. He's down here, presumably meaning the prototype. This quickly angers Dewey, yelling at Poppy about bringing him down here, but focuses more on keeping him on the outside. Damn, she really has seen better days, huh? Poppy points out to us that the children were not killed during the Hour of Joy, but instead taken downstairs to the prototype's home. They're alive, but they're sleeping, and the prototype knows that we're here and that we want to rescue them. She creates a plan. We'll fill the foundation with smoke, and then use old mining charges as the ignition source. We all free the orphans and friends here at Safe Haven and use the explosion to blow the entire Playcare facility into the sky afterwards. We can see a bunch of drawings on the wall of previous events that have happened, clearly drawn by the little critters. As we head to speak with Dewey, we can hear the little critters speaking to one another. They mention how they don't fully trust Poppy, and are worried that she will only bring more trouble onto them. Not to mention us, a previous employee at Playtime, and to be honest, that's a pretty fair concern. We speak with Dewey as he explains that they need our help, mostly with the Doctor, the same person that has been speaking with us from time to time, and that Doctor is of course Harley Sawyer, the person responsible for turning the children into these very creatures. Dewey is unsure how the Doctor is still alive or what he even is anymore, but he points out that the Doctor has been working hand in hand with the prototype, hunting, starving and hurting all of them down here in the safe haven. Dewey is getting visibly angrier, but he does manage to control himself. He asks us to retrieve the Omni Hand. It's essentially a master key that executives use to command anything within the Playtime factory, everything except this generator down here in the safe haven. We need to get that Omni Hand for the generators to reroute the red smoke to the Foundation and then to take control away from Prototype and Doctor. He points out that everybody down here is his family, and while he does understand that Poppy wants to destroy the Prototype at all costs, he asks us to consider the fact that if we throw everything and everyone away just to kill the Prototype, how much do we really waste? We take a final look around the safe haven before heading out in search of the Omni Hand, and we find another VHS. It's Eddie and Warren Bark speaking about the construction of the lower levels of Playtime. Warren Bark is mentioning to Eddie how they've built so much for Playtime over the years and always have been accommodating, but he does not like what he's being asked to build here. The game station, for example. At least it would be fun for the kids, or even the underground production plants. It would at least help with toy production, sure. But what on earth would a toy production company need with an underground prison? He points out that when they built Playcare, Mr. Ludwig would always talk about how much good it will be for the children. and just simply looking at the man was enough to believe every single word he said. But Warrenbach isn't sure that this is the same company, and he needs Eddie's word that whatever this prison is created for is something good, like maybe a game for the kids. Eddie reminds Warrenbach that in 1972 he signed a contract that is legally binding, stating that Warrenbach would build whatever is asked of him, and for 18 years, that is exactly what Warrenbach did. But then in 1990, he signed a renewal. But it seems that Warrenbach failed to read the small print, that any and all directives would be accomplished in appropriate time and with appropriate compensation should the project be completed to satisfaction. So Eddie reminds Warrenbach once more that Playtime has given a directive, which means that Warrenbach must now obey. He pushes Warrenbach near a ledge, stating just how great things are coming along, and that someday a lot of people will be very, very happy. He finishes with one final threat, saying that he is a businessman and that he likes getting jobs done, and this is just like any other. It will get done. I know I mentioned earlier about how impressive the building was throughout the Playtime facilities, and Mr. Warrenbach, you sir get an A+ for effort, my friend, but you have literally made a deal with the devils. There is actually a document describing the Safe Haven project that was led by Cyril Warrenbach. Its initial purpose was an easily defensible position for the security staff. It was designed to be completely self-sufficient from the rest of the facility in the event of an emergency, and it had a bunch of fail-safes, escape routes if needed, etc. The little critters are complaining about how hungry they are, saying that they can't even remember when they last ate. Yeah, don't get any ideas, little fellas, alright? Keep your teeth to yourselves. Another VHS tape shows Poppy crying while Ollie is speaking to her. He asks her if the bad men hurt her, to which she responds that there isn't anything that they could do that they haven't done already. Ollie pushes further, saying that there is something clearly bothering Poppy and that she should talk about it. Poppy refuses, starting to get upset at the idea, while Ollie still continues to push. Poppy eventually loses her temper and yells at Ollie that if he really wants to hear her talk. This seemingly excites Ollie, hoping that she will, but Poppy tells him that she is scared and angry and that she doesn't even know what to do, and explains how the Playtime doctors and the staff, they don't care how much they hurt people, they just keep doing it anyway. But what really terrifies her is that despite the amount of surgical procedures and the pain that she endures, as they continue to do these to her, she's beginning to feel less and less, scared that she's becoming less and less of a person and more of a thing. Ollie tries to comfort her, saying that to him she is a person, and that through speaking to him it makes him feel like there may even be a small part of him that is a person also. On the topic of Poppy, while we're beginning to head through the sewer system, we get to actually eavesdrop on a conversation between Poppy and Dowie, with Dowie asking Poppy to reconsider blowing the whole facility up, stating that everybody in here are not just things to throw away, but they're actual people. Poppy agrees that everyone here are people, but it doesn't change the fact that the facility needs to be destroyed. Dowie explains how the little critters look up to him, and that he's done his best to care for them, but Poppy disappeared, and they looked for her for ages and found nothing. He asks her why did she leave. Poppy tells him that she didn't have a choice, but Dowie doesn't like the answer, stating that they've been starving down here and hunted like animals, and now she's asking them to burn themselves with the facility. They end the conversation as the medic bot, who has now returned from helping Kissy Missy, agrees to talk to one another about it later. I have to say, I think I agree with Poppy on this one. The facility has to go, for sure. But I think we do need to try and get as many of the friendlier creations, get them the hell out of here before the explosion, and I doubt that they could ever return to a normal life, but their life still means something. We have a report about a subject 1322C. The child's name is Matthew Hallard, a thoughtful child, kind and considerate. Not the brightest in the classroom or even the most physically talented, but he has an undeniable charisma. The counsellor points out that everybody down here loves Matthew, but unfortunately he was already 15 when he came to the orphanage, much older than the typical child that adopters look for, something that Matthew understood. While he seems happy on the outside, it's pretty obvious that he's suffering. He blames himself for not being able to save his family. Claire Harper, the counsellor that was watching over Matthew, mentions how he is considered much like a leader to these younger children, reading them books for hours and breaking up fights, and he guides them. Claire even puts in the suggestion that if Matthew were to grow too old to be within play care, then to consider possibly bringing him on full time into the Playtime staff. A small note below Stella's suggests Matthew to be a good candidate for 1322C, should his personality mesh well with the other two subjects. She asks the doctor to be gentle with him, since he is such a fine young man, and it would be a waste to lose any more like him. A VHS tape gives us more information on 1322. The scientist is speaking about the acquisition of a 1322B, a child named Kevin Barnes, for Project Doe. Kevin has neural abnormalities, which has caused him to have behavioural problems in play care. He's been seen as aggressive, confrontational, and he even has trouble getting along with others. He is a problem child by the scientist's definition. He excels in all of the physical tests, all well above average in the game station examinations. This causes Dr. Sawyer to think that Kevin is perfect for Project Doe, despite his issues with behaviour. Other staff, however, are concerned that they're making a ticking time bomb, since they are trying to create an experiment that can fulfill multiple roles, and no single consciousness should be able to throw the others off. Even if one thing goes wrong, then they will have 900 pounds of very angry dough that can shift through small gaps and cause complete mayhem. But regardless of these very real concerns, Dr. Sawyer has accepted Kevin Barnes as the B personality of Doe, while 1322A and 1322C are now being collected for processing the following day. You might also remember from Chapter 3 a tape that mentioned how a young boy named Joseph walked in on a doctor, asking about his friend Kevin and if he was okay. This was the interruption that was mentioned by the doctor. Now, we know that 1322C is Matthew Hallard, and we also indirectly know who 1322A is also, that being Jack Ayers. You know, the kid that had the whole Joker moment falling into the vat? These three children make up the creature of Doe the Doe Man. Another reconnaissance report can be found that shows that the prototype has essentially got a group surrounded, staying outside the security door the entire night and just tapping on the walls. Ooh, dear God. Prototype really pushing the creepy meter to its limits, huh? We continue towards our goal with Yarnaby, once again following us like a bloodhound. We see more piles of critter corpses, and it really makes me wonder, are every single one of these once a child or a person? Like, there has to be tens of thousands of these things throughout the facility. How is that even possible? Oh yeah, that's right, Yarnaby. By the way, did you know that yarn is incredibly flammable? We put that to the test, and I gotta say, it's pretty efficient. Anyway, back to the little critters. We find a VHS tape with Hoppy bringing one of the smaller toys back to the safe haven after they were injured. Doe asks what happened when Hoppy mentions that they got jumped while trying to bring supplies up the elevator. They lost the supplies in the process, but Doe is just grateful that they're both okay, despite the wound. Doe treats the wound with some cream and takes the responsibility of getting the food for play care on himself. We actually find Doe nearby, and he mentions that he's been collecting parts for a generator when something comes out of the vent, freezing him in place. We help him, but he's been pretty badly hurt by this freezing agent. Despite my head pats to try and make him feel better, he's still in a lot of pain. He mentions how he is weak to the cold and how much it hurts him, and it's exactly why the doctor has essentially booby-trapped the area, to stop Doe from being able to move around freely. We leave Doe to rest and end up stumbling across the doctor once again. He tells us that we are exactly what the prototype feared, and it surprises him that Playtime had somebody of such rare quality, but never noticed. Sawyer points out that even he himself doesn't remember our face, but asks what brought us back to Playtime. Surely it couldn't have just been that silly little letter, wondering if somebody that we loved was here once. Or maybe we lost them. You know, I mentioned at the start of Chapter 1 that going to an abandoned building where people went missing at some stage, by yourself, at night, based on a random obscure letter that was probably not a great idea. So maybe, just maybe, this could be our first clue as to a hidden reason for our return to Playtime. The doctor continues to tell us that everybody died here from the experiments, and that Poppy simply told us a lie, and that she was hiding some pretty key information from us, including the fact that Poppy knew that the hour of joy was coming, as she is simply using us to get what she wants: violence. The same thing they all want. You can see the evidence everywhere. Once they had choices and freedom, They turn this place into a living hell, trapping us all in it with them. We stumble across the main surgery room that the doctor was using with instructions on how to deconstruct the human body. Ugh. Not to mention that just outside are a bunch of medical tents with conversations between children and Dr. White about their adoptions. And with the red smoke and the dead critters everywhere, this literally looks like a war zone. Another VHS shows the moment that Dr. Harley Sawyer awakes from his procedure, with Dr. White being the very person that performed it on him. Sawyer quickly realizes what happened and calls the Playtime staff traitors. Dr. White speaks to Sawyer asking him how he feels, and this angers Sawyer, immediately asking if White enjoys watching him writhe around like one of them. He begins complaining about head pain, stating that White must have done something wrong, and yells out to be told who gave the order for him to be turned into one of these things. Laith Pierre is quick to tell Sawyer that it was him that gave the order, saying that Sawyer kept making so many careless mistakes and was never able to clean up his own messes. Sawyer points out that Pierre couldn't do any better, besides they need his intellect and knowledge. Laith makes a good point. There is a reason that Sawyer is able to speak with him right now, and isn't in the stomach of Boxy Boo. From now on, Sawyer will answer any and all questions the lab boys have, and will carry out any and all procedures that they order him to do. That is it. He is now an open book. Sawyer vows to kill Laith Pierre at the very first chance that he gets. Look, these experiments are horrible, and they need to be stopped, but if any person deserves to go through it, Harley Sawyer would probably be at the top of the list. Inside the operating room are a bunch of monitors showing a bunch of creatures. Two even look like PJ Bugapilla and Huggy Wuggy, which means that the doctor has likely retrieved them after our previous fights with them and is either trying to fix them or harvest them. As we look into the next room, we can actually see that it is PJ Bugapilla. Still looking pretty dead to me and even missing an eye. I'm not sure if there's much coming back from that, but I don't really want to have to deal with these guys again if I can help it. We can find a lab mission statement that shows the moment that Dr. White is promoted in play care by Eddie Ritterman. He is now the head of the secondary laboratory, and he is responsible for maintaining staff and presenting his findings to the primary laboratory every week. They pretty much threaten Dr. White, stating that people in his job before him let ego or personal ambition get in the way of their job, and if he doesn't want to go down the same path as they did, then he will need to do his job properly and exactly as Playtime wants him to do it. His job is to make something useful out of the experiments that refuse to cooperate, to essentially rip them open and salvage anything that he might need. Any knowledge that he needs can simply be extracted from Dr. Sawyer, since everything with him now is only a single button press away. So this suggests that they aren't actually healing or treating the previous experiments down here, but instead salvaging parts from them to use elsewhere. I wonder what they could be using the parts for. The prototype, perhaps? We continue through the laboratory in search of the doctor, but get caught in one of his traps, forcing us down into a locked room. He asks us if we really thought Yarnaby was his only pet before releasing Bubba Chops in to kill us. I gotta admit, the little sheep guy here is not quite as scary as Yarnaby, but I'm not taking any chances. Bubba Chops, of course, is part of the Nightmares Critters toy line, and numerous other Nightmare Critters have been scattered around Chapter 4 as small toys, or some are even bigger versions such as Poe here in the cage. It takes a while before we manage to force our way out of the room, but unfortunately we trade one prison for another, inside a chamber with a small toy version of Simon Smoke. The doctor tells us that we have a simple choice. One life must be extinguished if we want to leave the room. Either ourselves or little Simon Smoke. Just pull the lever and whatever piece of humanity that was still within that doll will die along with it. The doctor points out that Poppy would kill the doll, as would Doey. Now it's our mission to do it. We can either have the door open, or hold on to the very small veil of morality that we seem to hold so dear. It definitely does seem like quite the moral dilemma that we find ourselves in, but we'll just go with option 3. We're not going to kill the little Simon Smoke toy, and we're just going to escape all the same. You gotta love it. We head upstairs to the doctor's office, and we don't really get the welcoming I was expecting for our very first checkup. It seems that Sawyer has himself a bunch of robot clones running around doing his bidding. I do have a question though. Why the white cloaks? Is it just to make the robots look more cool or ominous? I mean, he's pretty consistent with making them all look the same, and I guess you got to admire Sawyer's dress code. We find another VHS tape between the prototype and the doctor. Prototype is unhappy with the doctor, saying that he has not produced the results that he was looking for, saying that it was possibly a mistake letting him live. The doctor tells him that he just needs time, which annoys the prototype, stating that time is the very thing that he does not have. The doctor mentions that what he is being asked to do is something that they struggled with hugely, and that was when they were fully staffed and had everything at their disposal, let alone now, with no staff and the worst possible conditions. Without time, this will not work, saying that ultimately that he is the prototype's best chance at breaking that secret. The prototype laughs and says that whilst that is true, but to remember that the doctor's usefulness is the only reason that he has not been stripped for meat and spare parts. As we work towards shutting down the Doctor once and for all, he points out that Elliot Ludwig's machines mean nothing to him, and that they were simply a childish fantasy of a naive, broken man. It's interesting since Sawyer seemingly wants to hold all the credit in regards to the Bigger Bodies initiative, saying that it was his discovery and that he was the one that paved the golden path, showing just how much of an ego that Harley Sawyer actually has, and that his obvious resentment towards Elliot Ludwig shows that he was worried that Ludwig would take away from his accomplishments somehow. We overload the Doctor's system, and we can now see that the only thing remaining of Sawyer is his brain, which is now contained within this machine. And it is so incredibly ironic that this brain's one true weakness is brain freeze. Thank you, I'll be here a week. We place our red hand to a nearby machine and get ourselves some upgrades. Say hello to the Omni Hand. It's time to return to Safe Haven and see these little guys again. Poppy is understandably excited to see that we have the hand, which means that we can now carry out the plan. But we still have one big hurdle in our way, the prototype. The prototype will be very concerned that he has now lost the Doctor, which played a pretty big part in his schemes. Which means that the only thing the prototype has left is the orphans. Dewey's not a big fan of the plan, but the electricity goes down. Ollie rings and yells that the prototype is outside of the safe haven. Poppy asks Dewey to go outside and hold off the prototype while we fix the generator to keep everything safe. Dewey goes outside while Poppy tells Ollie to help us restart the generator. We follow his directions as he warns us that we need to be quick, since there will be a moment when all of the safe haven's defenses will be completely shut down. We seemingly fix the generator as Ollie lets out a big sigh, saying well done before Poppy comes back thanking us for getting everything working again. She mentions how there hasn't been any word from Dewey yet, but he's sure to be fine. Instead, let's head for the Foundation and begin the very first step to our plan. Hold on there, Poppy. You just sent Dewey to have a 1v1 fight with Prototype, and he hasn't come back or responded to anything. And what, we're just gonna leave that? We're not gonna investigate that any further? Seems a little cold-blooded, but yeah, I'm sure nothing could have possibly gone wrong. We waste no time and head towards the Foundations, grabbing the explosives along the way. We find another VHS tape that shows the moments when Mr. and Mrs. Ayers return to Playtime after receiving the letter about how they could save Jack's life. The scientists are telling the parents to stay calm, and when speaking to the patient as he only has just awakened, the mother is amazed and happy to see that her son is alive, while the father George is horrified at what they did to his son, yelling at the scientists to explain what they did to Jack. The mother tells him to stay quiet. It doesn't matter since that is still their son, while the father points out that what that is not even human. The mother asks the scientists if they can enter the room and speak with him, so they know for sure. The scientists agree and let them inside. Once the door closes, we can hear the mother speaking to Jack, who is now Dewey, apologizing to him, saying that she could have done something better for him, noticing him falling a little quicker, or maybe she could have reached a little faster. Dewey asks who they are, with them responding that they are his mother and father. Dewey tells them to leave him alone, with the mother insisting on staying. Dewey begins getting angry, telling her that he doesn't want to talk to anyone and to get out. George agrees that, it's probably best for them to leave, but the mother refuses again. Dewey stands up saying how the gentle voices lie. He knows what they do. They're lying, they're poking, and they're hurting. The mother yells at Dewey that she would never lie or hurt him, while the father is yelling at the scientist to open the damn door. We can hear a smashing sound as Dewey kills the mother, with the father now frantically smashing at the door to let him out. And with a final smashing sound, we begin to hear silence, before Dewey begins crying. Oh, this chapter really has taken this story to a much darker place, let me tell you. We head towards the pipeline that contains the red smoke and set our charges and begin overflowing the Foundations. We activate that bad boy with our Omni Hand, and now it's time to get the heck out of here. We head down the elevator and run into Dewey. He asks us where the prototype is, since he lost track of him. He expected him to go towards the Foundation to try and stop us, but he never did. He quickly realizes that the prototype never went towards the Foundations because he went to the safe haven instead. But that shouldn't make any sense, since we fixed the generator. We re-enter and find all of the little critters dead inside. Dowie is now crying and apologizing, saying how he couldn't protect them and that they deserved better than him, saying that he was only ever created to hurt things. It was all his fault. He begins getting angrier, saying how all of the scientists hurt him and the parents, the staff, looking like he actually is about to attack us, but then quickly reverts back to crying about how all of his friends are now dead. Dowie is made from 3 personalities, that of Jack, Kevin, and Matthew, and we're seeing Dowie swap between each of these personalities pretty much instantaneously. Dowie begins blaming us, saying that everything went bad when we showed up. This is Kevin's personality. Then swapping back, saying that it's not true, that we helped try and jumpstart the generator. This is likely Matthew, while the crying emotional version is Jack. Dowie yells at us saying that he's going to kill us before the room collapses in on him, revealing a brand new form. He has 3 heads within his mouth, representing the 3 boys that inhabit his body. However, at this stage, Kevin is the one that has taken full control. It's now time for us to get the heck out of here. I feel like a professional runner at this point. We take a zip line as Dowie follows right behind us, yelling how he couldn't save anyone. Remembering Dowie's previous weakness to cold, we lead him to the perfect place, shooting the canisters containing the cold gas. Dowie continues to yell about how people hurt him and how people lie, failing to save people that he cares about. As he is crushed, his personalities revert back to Jack as he begins to sob, telling us that he is sorry before dying. We come across a few different VHS tapes. The first is a recording made by Dowie. He mentions how he can't talk to anyone about this, so the next best thing is a recording. He says that the fighting has been really bad recently, and how he has seen a lot of stuff that he probably shouldn't have. He is struggling to keep his head straight. The others are looking at him to guide them as a leader, but for such a long time they had Poppy to lead them, and everything that she said made sense, but he can't find Poppy. He begins crying, saying how scary it is without her. He wonders if she ran just like he did, saying that he is currently outside of the prison. He realizes that he could simply make for the exit, something that he's wanted for the longest time. He is able to fit through small crevices and wouldn't have really any trouble escaping the Playtime facility. But there are others inside here that aren't like him and cannot escape on their own, and they're hungry and scared just like him. They mean a lot to him, and knowing how much they rely on him, he can't just leave them. He decides to return to them, using this recording as a way for him to remember this decision to stay down here and to protect them. And if he was to ever forget it, he can simply listen back to this and remind himself. The next one was recorded by Poppy. It is a recording right after the Hour of Joy. She mentions how she didn't know that it was going to go like this, thinking that they were simply just going to leave the facility or the factory. But now the prototype is telling her that they cannot leave ever. It's too risky to leave. And what happened to Poppy and the prototype cannot be allowed to happen again to anyone else. She mentions how that doesn't make the bodies any easier, and how the prototype said that the toys needed the bodies or they were simply going to starve down here. But it's still disgusting. She finishes the tape saying how much she misses her father. He always knew what to say, and things were so much better when he was running this place, and how much she misses him. Oh my goodness. So the daughter theory for Poppy may have actually been correct after all. The father that she's mentioning, by the way, was Elliot Ludwig. And this also indirectly points to the fact that Elliot is most likely not the prototype. We head down the shaft and find Poppy and Kissy Missy. Poppy is trying to get in contact with Ollie but isn't getting a response. She begins yelling at us, asking us why we killed Dowie and if we even know what's happening. Ollie calls back on the phone, much to the delight of Poppy, as she begins to explain what happened at the safe haven. Ollie interrupts her, telling her our exact location in the ventilation system, asking if that is exactly where we are. He tells us to stay where we are, and his voice changes to that of the prototype. He tells Poppy that the charade is over now, and that everything ends here. I knew it. I knew we couldn't trust Ollie. He was the prototype this entire time. Poppy mentions that Catnap, the Doctor, Huggy Wuggy and Mummy Longlegs are all gone and there is nobody left to do the prototype's bidding anymore. He tells Poppy that she doesn't need to pretend to be stronger than she actually is. It's time that she came home. Poppy asks the prototype how much he knows, with him responding, everything. She asks him, after all of these years, was there ever an Ollie? With the prototype saying that yes, once there was, but that was a very, very long time ago. He explains that he is on his way to find us, and all of Poppy's collaborators will be dealt with accordingly, while he has something very special prepared for Poppy, something that she'll never want to leave. He has collected all of the explosives that we set and tells Poppy that he is disappointed that even after all this time, he had always hoped that Poppy would see things differently. It's always been about Poppy and the prototype, this entire time. What they are cannot be burnt away, telling her once more it's time to come home. Poppy flees, telling us that she's sorry and that she can't go back inside the case. She just runs, leaving us and Kissy Missy to deal with the prototype. He laughs and mocks Poppy for abandoning us, saying that it's okay since he'll just find her anyway. We can hear beeping as the explosives have been placed around us. Kissy Missy quickly jumps into action, attempting to grab us before we fall. Her arm rips off quickly after grabbing us and we fall down into the lower levels of the facility. A long walkway surrounded with flowers and a door at the end. Using the Omni Hand, we gain access. Inside is another VHS. This time it's Laith Pierre, saying that if you're watching this, then you are very, very lost. This is the highest clearance and the highest security section of the whole factory, which means that if you are here when somebody finds you, then you will simply be shot. You can't sneak away either, since the alarm has now alerted anybody around of your exact location. We take a look outside and we can see Kissy Missy walking across the walkway, severely injured. Wait, that's not Kissy Missy. It seems Huggy Wuggy has made his return after all this time. And with that concludes the entire timeline and story of Poppy Playtime thus far. It was an absolute blast covering the series and all the new information released with Chapter 4, and quite frankly, I cannot wait to see what's next. If you made it until the end of the video, please write Playtime Puppets in the comments below and let me know. Thank you so much if you did. Please remember to like as it helps out the channel a bunch, and of course subscribe for more lore content in the future. Not to mention Chapter 5, which cannot come soon enough. Until next time guys, peace.